You're standing barefoot on damp earth, night mist curling around your ankles like a living thing, when a distant horn shatters the stillness a warning that Rome's iron shadow is crawling north. In that single heartbeat, you feel every drop of Briton blood in your veins blaze to life, as if the very soil is calling for vengeance. Your name is Boudica, and before dawn you will decide whether to kneel or to set the world on fire. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background human. Let's dive together into today's journey. You arrive in the world among the damp heather and soft gray dawn of Eastern Britannia, a place Rome will one day label barbaric, simply because it cannot read its own reflection in these wild, rain-soaked hills. Smoke escapes your family's thatched roundhouse in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of peat and simmering barley pottage. Inside, your mother's humming braids itself through the clink of bronze bangles. Outside, moorland winds sing a counter melody in a tongue older than empire. You learn to listen because here, the land speaks first and loudest. While Roman children to the south memorize declensions under tiled roofs, you memorize hoofbeats and thunder. Your playpen is a churned patch of mud behind the livestock pen, and your first toys are splintered spear shafts left over from last season's skirmish. By the time your baby teeth loosen, you can already name every hill fort on the horizon and every constellation that hovers above it. Stories are currency in your tribe, and the elders spend lavishly. Tales of horn-helmeted gods who decide harvests, rivers that swallow cowards, queens who wrestle fate beret-handed. You file each legend away like a weapon in waiting. Your given name, Boudica, victory settles on you like prophetic armor. You repeat it under your breath, when the village boys jeer, when the weather tests your resolve with sleet that needles the skin, when the older warriors laugh at the length of your arms but secretly fear the length of your shadow. Your parents encourage every spark of ferocity. Daughters, they say, must be blades honed on both love and hardship, because love alone has a habit of snapping in battle. Training begins at dawn. Forget arithmetic. Your first equation is distance multiplied by velocity equals survival. You learn how to judge a spear's balance by fingertip feel, how to roll after a fall without losing breath, how to read hoof prints in wet clay as fluently as Romans read legal contracts. A scar blossoms on your forearm the morning you misjudge your pony's sudden lurch. The druids declare it an omen, a blood signature signing you over to destiny. You pretend to scoff, but at night you trace the line with your thumb, wondering what sealed bargain throbs beneath the scab. Some evenings, smoky with oakwood wood fire, elders gather in the longhouse to debate Rome. Their voices rise and fall like crows startled off a carcass. One claims alliance brings trade, wine, and silver brooches. Another spits that alliance brings shackles disguised as treaties. The only certainty is that Rome never arrives empty-handed. It always carries both a gift and a blade. You and your friends hide behind woven partitions, memorizing each argument, weighing futures like pebbles in a sling. By adolescence, the horizon itself feels cramped. Your pony graduates to a warhorse with a mane like storm clouds and a temper to match. You name her Tyrannus after the thunder god, and together you test every boundary. Riverbanks that crumble underhoof, ridges that slice the sky, sacred groves thick with mist where druids carve prophecy into bark. In those groves, they sometimes pull you aside, pressing cold ash onto your forehead while murmuring verses older than memory. You don't understand the words, but the hush that follows feels heavy enough to shape history. The first Romans you see up close are surveyors' thin men in immaculate cloaks, busy forking bronze calipers into the sod as though measuring for a coffin. They smile politely, speak in flawless though accented Brythonic, and sketch straight lines across a landscape built of curves. Your pulse drums against your ribs. Instinct says remove them like a tick, but your father says wait and study. Rome changes tactics faster than clouds change shape. Then comes marriage, not arranged, but strategically orchestrated. You wed Prasutagus, king of the Iceni, whose reputation balances caution with cunning. On your wedding night, you trade jokes about Roman arrogance over honeyed mead. The next morning, you trade information about Roman troop movements over smoked eel. Love glints between you like sunlight on water rare, unexpected but alive. Together you rule. He handles diplomacy, you inspect the shields, and both of you keep a ledger of every Roman favor owed, every Roman slight delivered. Rome calls your kingdom a client. You call it a clenched fist hidden behind a courteous smile. Client status means autonomy on parchment, yet strangulation in practice. Roman procurators arrive demanding tribute in coin, in grain, in souls. You comply barely and only to buy time. When a procurator presents you with a polished bronze mirror, you thank him sweetly while imagining the mirror's edge carving a neat red line across his throat. Motherhood brings daughters, Isolde and Rhiannon, fierce storms in miniature. You cradle them by the hearth, whispering not lullabies but tactical maxims. Always know the exit. Never trade integrity for approval. If fear must come, let it be felt by your enemies. They giggle, unaware that each lesson is a stitch sewing invisible armor around their hearts. Years slide by on greased rails too quickly, too smoothly. You sense the approaching derailment like a wolf senses winter. Prasutagus, who once rode at your side across dew-slick meadows, begins coughing up flecks of blood the color of crushed elderberries. Roman physicians offer syrups and platitudes. The Druids offer chants and ashes. Nothing offers reprieve. As the sickness scrawls ruin through his lungs, he drafts a will aimed at outfoxing Rome, half his estate to the emperor, half to you and your daughters. In Roman law, this should signal goodwill. In Roman practice, it smells like weakness. At your husband's funeral pyre, you stand without tear steers would blur the future. Flames roar sky high, reflecting in every warrior's eyes. Rome sends a single delegate, a bored tribune, who yawns behind a perfumed kerchief. In that yawn, you hear your tribe's death warrant. Sure enough, the procurator, Catus Decianus, arrives weeks later with a legion's worth of arrogance stuffed into 50 bureaucrats. He declares the emperor now owns everything: lands, livestock, your treasury's silver torques. Loans imaginary sums Rome claims it once extended to the Iceni suddenly do. Resistance is rebellion against law and civilized order. You attempt diplomacy, you argue treaties, cite precedents, quote the very Roman statutes they worship. Decianus responds by ordering your flogging and the public violation of your daughters. Pain is a tutor with a brutal curriculum. Blood paints your back, and your girls' screams turn the sky raw. When the Romans finish, they leave you sprawled in the dirt like refuse. You lie there until their footfalls fade. Then, inch by inch, you risen not healed, never healed, but sharpened into something beyond flesh. You swear an oath in a voice scraped hollow. Rome will drown in the fire it lit. Word spreads faster than plague. Neighboring tribes, the Trinovantes, the Corioltavi, even scattered Brigantes sick of Rome's tax send envoys offering blades, grain, men. The Druids gather at Mona to bless your standard, a crimson banner depicting Andraste, goddess of righteous slaughter. You ride beneath it, hair unbound, eyes bright as forged sparks. Soldiers flock to you not out of duty but out of hunger for justice. Kings step aside. On a chill dawn beneath an ash-gray sky, you address your swelling host. Tens of thousands stand shoulder to shoulder, shields clattering like thunder. You speak not of politics but of vengeance, not of nations but of survival. When you finish, the war cry that erupts rattles birds out of distant treetops. Even the wind seems to pause, as if to witness the birth of a storm. You march south. Roads Rome once touted as marvels now funnel your fury straight at their throats. Camulo Dunham Colchester to the Roman slooms ahead, its temple to Claudius towering like arrogance made stone. Its defenders are retirees, ex-war legionaries who thought Britannia tamed. They barricade themselves behind half-finished walls, confident bricks will halt wrath. They are wrong. Your warriors swarm through the streets, torching timber and flesh alike. Statues topple and melt. The temple's gilded doors blister under flame. Survivors beg for mercy in Latin. You answer in the clang of iron. When the smoke clears, the once proud Colonia is an ash smear on the map. News races to Londinium, London, and Verulamium St. Alban, scaried by refugees whose haunted eyes warn that the frontier has awakened. Rome scrambles. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus marches back from a campaign in distant Wales, trailed by hard-bitten legionaries who mutter of omens, wells bubbling blood, ghosts wailing at twilight, statues weeping tears of milk. But omens do not defeat army, strategy does. Suetonius chooses to abandon Londinium rather than defend it, sacrificing the prosperous hub to buy time. When your columns arrive, the city's merchants have fled, leaving warehouses stuffed with silk, wine, and terror. You burn it all, the orange glow reflected in the Thames like a second, more honest sunrise. By the time Verulamium falls, your tally of Roman dead has climbed into the tens of thousands. Smoke pillars mark your trail, charred milestones litter roads once famed for precision engineering. The Empire, which claimed eternal dominion, suddenly looks mortal, armor dented, its pride bleeding. In the Senate across the sea, panicked whispers suggest abandoning Britannia altogether. Nero, the emperor with a taste for theatrics, debates whether to recall Suetonius in disgrace, or simply applaud your destruction as a cautionary spectacle. Yet even as victory banners snap in the wind, a knot tightens in your gut. Rome is wounded, not slain, and a wounded predator is most lethal. Suetonius has chosen his battlefield, a narrow defile somewhere along Watling Street, where rolling hills funnel attackers into a kill zone. He plants his legions in close packed ranks, shields interlocked, scorpion artillery braced behind. His numbers are smaller, but discipline hardens them into a wall. On the eve of battle, you walk the campfires, studying faces illuminated by flicker light, farmers, herders, former slaves who tasted freedom in the flames of Roman villas. You see not soldiers but stories, each man and woman fueled by rage, loss, hope. You wonder if hope alone can slide a blade between iron plates. Tyrannus stamps beside you, sensing tension. You run a hand through her mane and whisper a promise you may not keep. Tomorrow we finish what Rome began. Overhead, clouds bruise purple, heavy with unshed rain. Sparks drift skyward, trying to become stars. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hoots a sound, both warning and benediction. You close your eyes briefly, summoning every lesson etched into bone. Trust your instinct. Strike before hesitation curdles into fear. Remember that victory sometimes costs more than defeat. When you open them, dawn is a sword edging over the eastern ridge. The final reckoning waits. And this, listener, is where we pause for no one, the knife edge between fury and fate, the hush before stormbreak. The embers of your rebellion glow hot, but Rome has never surrendered without poisoning the chalice. In our next chapter, we will ride into that tightening valley, hear the clash of shield against spear, and feel the world stagger beneath the weight of one woman's will. Close your eyes if you wish. The story will keep its edge until you return. The morning breaks not with birdsong, but with the groan of war, drum slow, rhythmic, ancient. Across the battlefield, dew clings to grass already flattened by the passage of thousands of feet. Your army stretches behind you like a tide about to crash. Mothers with spears, farmers with butcher knives, former slaves gripping clubs with the strength of desperation. The fury of the misty isles has gathered under your name, and now the storm must break. You ride to the front, Tyrannus snorting steam into the chilled morning air. You wear a torque of twisted gold, and your long red hair flows loose, wild as your people's hopes. The chariots rumble into place, beside you painted with spirals, blessed with sacred symbols carved into their wheels. Every face you pass reflects your rage, your promise, and your burden. From the Roman side, the silence is unnerving. No howling, no chant, just the hard discipline of well-oiled machinery. The legions are locked in formation, their shields overlapping, their pila glinting in the dawn. Red cloaks hang motionless in the still air, and their expressions are unreadable, carved from granite. You can almost admire their stillness almost. But they are few, perhaps 10,000. You are told you command over 200,000 if the elders' tallies are true. Women, children, the old, everyone who could wield a weapon or throw a stone. And so you stand, atop a chariot of vengeance, convinced by numbers but uneasy all the same. Because numbers don't always win wars. Sometimes, the weight of discipline crushes chaos. You raise your spear to the heavens. Today, we fight not for conquest, but for memory, for what they stole, for the blood they spilled, for the daughters they dishonored. Rome called us barbarians. But who then are the true beasts? A cheer surges through the ranks. The ground trembles as your people answer your cry. It is not elegant, it is not polite. It is the scream of a wounded earth ready to bite back. The first wave charges. Your chariots race ahead, blades fixed to wheels, horses foaming with exertion. You drive into the Roman line, expecting the wall to shatter like rotted bark, but it holds. Roman pila fly through the air with surgical precision. Horses scream, chariots crash. Your warriors fall in sickening spirals. The Iceni and Trinovantes push forward, trampling over their own dead to reach the line, howling like wolves starved of retribution, and still, the Roman wall holds. Spears jab out in perfect unison. Short gladii follow in brutal arcs, blood spurts like burst wineskins. You scream to push forward. The second wave floods the valley, clogging the space between the hills. Your numbers begin to work against you. There's no room to maneuver. The back ranks don't know the front has stalled. They're pressed in, shoulder to shoulder, unable to retreat, unable to breathe. The Romans wait, patient as stone. They open channels through their ranks, allowing dart throwers and ballistae to fire directly into the crush of your people. Every strike is clean, lethal. It is as if the empire itself has taken on the form of one vast, faceless machine. You try to ride along the side, to redirect, to call for a flanking move, but sound is swallowed in the roar. All around you, chaos feeds on panic. You look up and see carrion birds already circling. You taste blood on your tongue, not your own, a spatter from someone you'll never know, someone who believed in you. Your daughters are somewhere in the rear ranks, safe, you hope. But safety is a word the Romans have set aflame. Hours pass, though they feel like minutes, or maybe only heartbeats. The sun arcs overhead, indifferent. The mud underfoot becomes slick with blood and bile. Bodies pile so high that even the Romans begin to slow, but not falter, not break. You ride again to the center. You find an old veteran still fighting with a bone-handled dagger, screaming that the land will remember. He's cut down in an instant. This was meant to be the final blow, the thunder that would crack Rome's spine and scatter its bones back across the sea. But you realize now that the empire does not fracture like a man. It bends, then burns everything that pushed against it. And the fire is coming. Suetonius gives the order, a slow, deliberate advance. The Roman lines press forward, pushing you into your own ranks. You try to rally a retreat, to pull back toward the higher ground. But the wagons that carried your supplies, the ones meant to show your people's triumph, block the path. The retreat becomes a stampede, trapped between the advancing blade and the ironclad wall of your own making. It is over, but not for you, not yet. Night falls as silence returns to the valley. The moans of the dying linger like smoke. Somewhere, Suetonius surveys the carnage and writes a report that will earn him praise in Rome. He will call it order restored. He will call it justice. You ride alone into the woods. Your spear is broken, your cloak torn, your heart beyond wounded. You dismount only when Tyrannus can go no further. The mare collapses beside a stream, her eyes dull but trusting. You whisper your thanks and press your brow to hers before letting her go. Then you drink from the stream and let its cold bite remind you that you're still alive. The Druids taught you that every warrior faces a moment beyond glory, when legend must yield to endurance. This is that moment. You were Boudica the queen, the avenger, the flame. Now, you are simply a woman walking into the unknown. You do not know where your daughters are. You do not know who among your people still lives. But you walk because if you stop, the silence will claim you, and the Romans will have truly won. For days you move in shadows. Farmers offer you bread and water without words. One lays a sprig of rowan in your hand, a symbol of protection. Another carves your name into the bark of a tree, then weeps. They all know what you tried to do. You reach a grove where druids once sang prophecies. Now it's quiet, scorched at the edges. You fall to your knees and scream not words, not curses, just the raw sound of grief too vast for language. The trees do not answer, but the wind moves. They say you poisoned yourself, that you chose death over Roman chains. That's what Suetonius writes in his reports. That's what Tacitus echoes for posterity. A clean, tragic ending, neat, contained. But you never were neat, and your rage was never meant to be contained. Others say you disappeared into the forests, that you walk still, a whisper in the mist, a shadow at the edge of Roman dreams. That every uprising, every act of resistance in Britannia carries your spirit like a torch in the dark. And maybe that's true, because Rome won the battle, but only on the surface. The soil remembers you, the wind remembers your name, and so do the people, even now. They say your daughters survived, raised in secret among the druids, that they grew into women who knew not fear, only fire. One became a healer, singing the songs you once hummed. The other, a warrior, who carved your name into her blade and made the earth tremble once more. And when Rome finally abandoned Britannia, leaving behind broken roads and forgotten altars, it was your ghost that drove them out. Not with armies, but with memory. And that, dear listener, is how empires truly die. Not in battle, but in the stories they can't erase. You were not always the fire. Before the rebellion, before the Romans made you a fury incarnate, you were a woman who laughed. You remember that, don't you? The way the light played on water during spring festivals, how the barley cakes crumbled in your daughter's small fists, the clatter of market days in the Iceni strongholds. Your world was woven of song and scent, and the hush of dawn mist lifting from the grass. You were queen then, not the kind who sat on marble thrones beneath painted ceilings, but one who rode beside her people, who listened. A queen whose feet were dirty after every village visit, who knew the names of every horse in the royal stables and every child born during the solstice. You ruled by presence, not distance. Your husband, Persudigus, was clever in the way that tribal kings had to be smiling at Rome while building escape tunnels behind the feast hall. He taught you to play the long game. Not every victory comes with blood. Some come with silence, with strategy, with survival. The Romans called it peace. You called it pretending. But peace built under foreign rule is like roofing a home with bark it leaks and eventually rots. Persudigus had a plan. He named Rome as co-heir to the Iceni lands alongside his daughters, a gesture of alliance, not submission. But when he died, the empire laughed. Rome does not share. It consumes. You remember the day the emissaries arrived, cold men with hot eyes. They did not come with condolences. They came with ledgers, with documents written in languages no one asked you to learn, with legal words sharp enough to cut a kingdom in two. They seized your lands. They took your livestock. They beat your people. They dragged your daughters through the dust, through the spit-lined streets of a Roman camp. What they did next will not be spoken of here, not because it must be forgotten, but because some agonies crack the very air, and retelling them would split the sky above our quiet evening. You screamed, you wept, and then you stopped. And when you stood again, you were something else. The Druids say every soul is tempered. Some break, some bend, and some, like yours, take on the shape of a blade. You became that blade. The first to join you were the Iceni warriors, your own people, blood of your blood. Then came the Trinovantes, long simmering under Roman taxation. Then the displaced, the wounded, the orphaned, the furious. Word spread fast. Boudica rides, Boudica rises. You did not hide your intent. No backroom negotiations. No secret alliances. You let Rome see you coming. You let the governors quake behind their high stone walls while you summoned the storm. You didn't raise a rebellion. You summoned a reckoning. Your first strike was Camulodunum. It had once been the Trinovantes' sacred site, the heart of a proud people. Rome built a colony over it, Camulodunum complete with a temple to Claudius, demanding the locals help pay for its construction. Imagine building a shrine to your conqueror, and then sending the bill to the conquered. So you raised it. The soldiers laughed at first. A woman leading tribes? They stopped laughing when your warriors came screaming out of the forests, chariots slicing through their flanks, arrows darkening the sun. The temple collapsed in flame. The streets ran with red. You didn't spare the collaborators, those who wore Roman togas and sipped imported wine while their neighbors starved gone. Your fury didn't distinguish between uniform and allegiance. If they knelt to Rome, they fell with Rome. You gave them a chance to flee. They used it to pray to stone gods. Let their prayers burn. You remember standing on the rubble of that temple. You remember the way the firelight painted your daughters' faces. You remember feeling for a moment like maybe vengeance could make you whole again. But vengeance has no bottom. You only realize that after you've jumped in. Your next move was Londinium. A Roman city, yes, but barely defended. A trading hub swollen with wealth. Suetonius had marched north to put down a separate rebellion and left the city open like a wound. You warned them. You sent word, leave. Take only what you can carry. The city belongs to the earth now. Many listened, some did not. So you leveled it. You remember the sounds more than the sights. The cracking of timber, the wails of those who thought their Roman citizenship would protect them, the rhythmic drumming of your warriors singing songs older than empire. The earth itself seemed to cheer you on. Historians will later call it a massacre, as though Rome had not been massacring your people one village at a time for decades, as though this was new violence, rather than returned violence. What Rome does slowly, you return swiftly. Then Verulamium, another Romanized town, another flame in the night. Rome sent riders scrambling in all directions, begging for reinforcements, for order, for gods to intervene. But the gods remained silent. Perhaps they remembered what was done to your daughters. And yet, amid the fire, you never forgot who you were. You spared the children when you could. You gave the enemy the chance to flee when they listened. You fought with fury, not cruelty. But the line between them blurs when vengeance burns too hot. Some of your own people began to worry. They saw the piles of Roman heads and wondered if your flame would ever stop consuming. The druids whispered of balance, of offerings made not just to war gods, but to healing ones too. You nodded, you listened, and then you ordered the march to Suetonius, because there could be no healing until the blade was done carving. Your spies reported that Suetonius had regrouped, that he'd found a narrow valley with high banks and only one approach perfect for defense, that his numbers were far smaller than yours, but his veterans were ruthless. These were the same soldiers who had conquered Mona, burning druidic groves and temples, salting sacred soil. You knew what was waiting, but you couldn't stop. You wouldn't. Too much blood had already been spilled. Too many eyes were on you, seeing a queen reborn as justice itself. Your daughters rode beside you. One carried your husband's blade. The other wore a cloak stitched with the symbols of every tribe who marched under your banner. They were not girls anymore. You'd seen to that. On the morning of the battle, you felt the shift, the quiet, the dread. You stood before your army, flames flickering behind your eyes, and you gave the speech that would be remembered long after your bones had turned to dust. You didn't speak of victory. You spoke of refusal, refusing to be forgotten, refusing to be broken, refusing to kneel. Your people cheered, not because they expected to win, but because finally someone had dared to say no with fire instead of fear. And then you rode. The rest, as you know, became a tragedy carved in iron and loss. But this part, this surge toward confrontation, this swell of history before it breaks that was you at your most powerful, the empire would survive the day. But it would never forget the sound of your people's footsteps. And neither should we. Not tonight. Not ever. They say silence is louder after a battle. Louder than drums. Louder than marching feet. Louder than screaming. And in the silence that followed the defeat at Watling Street, the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The fields where your warriors fell stayed red for days. Birds circled, then vanished. Even the Romans moved slowly, burdened by their own survival. Suetonius, grim and methodical, gave orders not to celebrate but to erase. Burn the dead, level the wagons, scatter the ashes of your army across the dirt, and salt the earth with indifference. But memory cannot be salted away, and you, Boudica, queen of the Iceni, could not be silenced. They wanted a neat ending, so they wrote one. Tacitus claimed you took poison, a queen choosing death with dignity rather than chains and humiliation. Cassius Dio painted you like a mythic figure, driven to madness by grief, disappearing into the mists of her homeland. Perhaps there is truth in both, but perhaps, just perhaps, you chose a third path, one the Romans could not comprehend, one that did not end with death or surrender, but with movement, with fading into the land that had borne you and becoming part of it. You were never captured. No body was ever paraded. No tomb was ever found, because some stories are not meant to be buried. In the years that followed, Britannia changed. The Roman Empire clamped down on its northern territory. Governors came and went, roads were paved, taxes collected, statues erected, but none of them stayed upright for long, because under the polished stone of Roman civilization, the soil still whispered your name. Rebellions flickered to life every few years. Small uprisings, lone assassins, vanishing cults who prayed to a red-haired goddess of justice. Mothers told their daughters to never forget. Fathers painted blue spirals on the walls in secret. Druids returned in disguise, hiding their rites in caves and groves far from the reach of Roman law. And in every one of them you were there, not as a ghost, not as a martyr, but as a seed. The empire did not fall that day at Watling Street, but something inside it cracked. A certainty, a grip, a belief that it could take anything, crush anyone, and never face the consequences. You proved otherwise. Your daughters, yes. The stories say they lived, smuggled out under cover of night by your most loyal guards. One found sanctuary in the western hills, where she became a teacher of herbs and runes, tending to the wounds Rome left behind. The other took to the highlands, training warriors who would one day rise again. Neither claimed your title, but both bore your spirit, quietly, fiercely. And far beyond Britannia, your name traveled. In Gaul, rebels spoke it in hushed tones as they plotted. In Germania, chieftains lifted their axes and invoked your fire. Even centuries later, when Rome finally collapsed beneath its own weight, some would say the fall began not with invasion, but with rebellion yours. Not all victories are swift. Some take root slowly, blooming long after the hands that planted them have vanished. And what of your people? The Iceni faded, as all tribes do in the march of time, but not into nothing. Their blood lives on, in bones buried deep beneath East Anglia, in accents, in legends, in stubbornness passed from grandmother to granddaughter, a refusal to be told who you are by people who do not know your name. There are places in Britain today, wooded hills, lonely stones, stretches of wind-swept land where locals still feel something ancient moving. Some say it's just weather, others aren't so sure. And if you listen closely, in the quietest hour before dawn, you might still hear hooves, a chariot's wheels. A low voice promising that vengeance is not the same as violence, and justice is not the same as mercy, but both live in the hearts of the wronged. And now, dear listener, you return to your time. You stretch out in your bed, the modern world humming softly around you, LED lights instead of firelight, screens instead of stone tablets. But somewhere deep in your chest, something lingers. Not anger, not even sorrow. Resolve. Because you've walked for a while in her sandals, and you've seen that history is not made by those who wait to be saved. It is made by those who dare to stand up, even when they are doomed to fall. By those who say no not with their mouths, but with their lives. You do not need to lead an army to carry that spirit. Maybe you carry it when you speak up, when it's easier to be quiet. Maybe you carry it when you choose kindness in a world that values conquest. Maybe you carry it when you remember someone who history tried to forget. Boudica was not a saint. She was a storm. She rose, she raged, and she broke herself against the empire. And yet, long after Rome is rubble, she rides on. So sleep now, not in sorrow but in strength, because even in your quietest hour, you are not alone. There is fire behind you, wind beside you, and the spirit of a warrior queen in your corner, and she is watching, waiting, and proud. The wind gnaws at the edge of the world, keening over packweiss and moonlit snowfields, and for one breath-held moment you hear it shape a name that was never meant for human tongues. It is the hush before a story, the tremor in the dark when every lantern guttered out, a promise that the night itself has teeth. If you listen now, truly listen, you may feel those teeth pressed lightly against your imagination, and realize that not all tales are told beside warm hearths. You are small against the Arctic. The sky stretches so wide it feels like an inverted ocean, waves of aurora rippling overhead. Below, the sea is a lidless eye of black water rimmed by splintered ice. You taste brine in the wind, mixed with the faint musk of seal oil lamps glowing inside a snowy block shelter. Tonight you sit in that round white room among strangers who are somehow family, wrapped in furs that smell of sun-eye-dried lichen and salt. No one speaks at first. Stories here are not plucked like berries. They are coaxed, as a hunter coaxes a wary seal from a breathing hole. An elder clears his throat, voice quiet as frost. He does not begin anything. He simply exhales words, and the words become worlds. You close your eyes and find yourself standing on the shore of time, where the sea once had no bounds and the land could still change its mind. There is a girl there, her hair tangled with kelp, her cheeks stung raw by sleet. Her name is Sedna, though in the old language it tastes more like sighing than speech. She lives with a father who loves her but fears the emptiness of his own aging days. Suitors come, a hunter swathed in fox pelts, a paddler whose drum beats like a raven's heart. Sedna refuses them all. She knows that to marry is to surrender her small, fierce fire of selfhood. One night, another suitor arrives. He stands just beyond the glow of the oil lamp, wrapped in a cloak of dark feathers that shift like restless thoughts. His voice is soft, promising endless fish and fur and a life beyond hunger. Sedna's resistance melts beneath the yearning he awakens, yearning not for comfort but for distance, for a horizon that belongs only to her. She goes with him, mouth salty with unshed tears, believing she steps toward autonomy. Instead, she lands upon a wave-swept rookery where gulls scream over reeking nests. The suitor shrugs off his cloak, wings unfold, and she sees the beak, the gleaming eyes. He is no man but a Fulmar spirit, and she is his captive. When winter blooms across the water, Sedna's father feels the missing weight of his daughter like frostbite in a bone. He paddles after her in a sealskin kayak, cuts through kilometers of angry sea. She sees him approaching, and the bone cage around her heart cracks. She runs to the boat, leaping over tide pools slick with guano. The Fulmar spirit screams, feathers slashing the air, but he cannot stop her from climbing into her father's trembling arms. They paddle hard for home. Behind them, the Fulmar spirit summons a storm so vengeful it seems to peel the horizon back. Waves hammer the kayak, prying at seams with fingers of foam. Sedna's father, desperate to stay afloat, pushes her toward the churning sea, praying the spirit will take her and spare him. She clutches the gunwales with frostburned hands. He hacks at her fingers with his knife. One by one they tumble into the water, sinking like pale anemones. The sea swallows her screams, and, at its blackest depth, remakes them. Sedna does not die. She drifts through sunless strata where strange fish glow with lantern bellies. Her severed fingers sprout into seals, walruses, narwhal's life born of betrayal. She becomes the mother of the sea beasts. From her hair grow kelp forests. From her sighs rise tidal pulses. Hunters who need food must send shamans down the rope of trance, comb her snarled locks, soothe her loneliness. If they forget, storms close the breathing holes, and hunger stalks the villages. You realize then that survival in this world is not a matter of spears alone, but of remembering who must be honored beneath the ice. The elder's voice threads silence again, and you open your eyes inside the snow house. The lamp flame flickers as though stirred by unseen wings. Across from you, a child stares, wide-eyed, bundling memories of the story the way others bundle tinder. To your left, someone carves whalebone with an ulu, tracing a curving fin perhaps, a seal, perhaps a finger. You feel Sedna's salt still on your tongue. You think of debts unpaid. Outside, the aurora writhes like a celestial serpent. Its green coils remind you of another tale, this one seldom shared with outsiders. It is the story of the Ijirak, the shape-shifter who drifts between worlds, the way smoke drifts between logs. The Ijirak steals children who wander too far from camp. Not to kill them, never that, but to relocate them deep in the labyrinth of tundra hummocks where compass needles spin and time forgets itself. The children are cared for, fed berries and fish, lulled by lullabies no human throat could sing. Years later, they may stumble back to their families, faces unchanged, hearts forever tilted at a strange angle. They dream in two languages and belong to neither. The elder warns that naming an Ijirak aloud invites its curiosity. But there are other precautions. Tuck caribou sinew into the hood of a wandering child, sew bright beads onto the cuffs of their parka so the spirit sees they are cherished. Love is a lighthouse in fog. Spirits respect a child well loved. They hunger only for the neglected. You sip hot broth from a carved wooden bowl, taste seal marrow and spruce tips. The warmth spreads through you like a small sunrise. Another voice, this time a woman's, floats across the circle. She sings rather than speaks, words rising and falling in a pattern older than notation. Her story is the song of the Sila, the breath of the world, the invisible current that moves weather, animals, even thoughts. Sila is gentler than the blizzard and fiercer than famine. Sila sees everything yet is seen by none. When hunters traverse shifting flows, they murmur respect to Sila, asking the world's breath to steady under their boots. When children cough in the dark months, mothers warm stones by the lamp, releasing steam that carries prayers into Sila's open mouth. But Sila can be angered. Some winters, winds shred igloos, hurling blocks of snow like spiteful dice. Dogs whine, ears flattened, long before the gale arrives. They hear Sila gather her skirts of ice splinters. Shamans venture out, faces painted ash white, to bargain. They offer songs, sinew carvings, the promise of communal harmony. If the bargain pleases, the gale softens, snow settling like feathers instead of knives. If not, the village must endure. Survival becomes a lesson in humility. Even the tallest hunter is shorter than a snowdrift when the world exhales. Time slides, the lamps gutter low. Someone refills them with melted blubber, the smell thick and oddly comforting. You feel your eyelids droop, but the stories grip you. They feel less like entertainment than instruction manuals for negotiating with darkness. Out there, beyond walls that are only snow, roam entities older than constellations. Forget them and you court calamity. Remember them and you carve a fragile corridor of safety. Now a younger hunter speaks, voice bright with reverence. He tells of Nanarluk, the great polar bear spirit, guardian of the ice edge. In life, Nanarluk was the mightiest bear ever sighted, muscles rolling like dunes, coat yellow-white and scarred by 1,000 battles. One spring, weakened by age, he lay down on river ice as it broke. The flow drifted south, and he watched the shoreline residue tundra giving way to waves, waves to open ocean. When he died, his breath rose and condensed into a spirit so vast it could cup glaciers in its paws. Now Nanarluk prowls the boundary where solid ice meets frigid sea, ensuring balance. Hunters who kill too greedily may spot his shadow beneath the water, a ghostly white mass pacing beneath their kayaks. Paddles freeze mid-stroke, harpoons hesitate, excess mocks survival. Nanarluk reminds them to take only what the village needs. You imagine that enormous outline sliding under thin ice, silent as guilt. You vow absurdly to moderate your own invisible hungers in a place where even breathing seems indulgent. The circle grows quieter. Stories deplete but do not end. They simply migrate to dreams. One by one, your companions crawl into skins and drift into sleep. You lie back on caribou pelts, staring at the domed ceiling glittering with ice crystals. Somewhere out on the floe, a lead opens with a wet crack. You picture Sedna stirring below, brushing walrus whiskers from her cheeks. You picture the Ijirak tilting its head toward the crack, listening for lonely footsteps. You picture Nanerlook resting his great chin on crossed paws, eyes reflecting a sky swirling with green fire. As consciousness slips its moorings, you feel not hear whispered assurance. You are guest, not prey, tonight. The stories have accepted your listening heart. Rest, they murmur, but lightly. Dawn is brief here, and new tales wait beyond the horizon of sleep, eager to frost your courage and test your wonder. When the oil lamp finally winks out, darkness becomes total yet somehow tender, like a felted cloak. Your last thought before sleep is that the Arctic never wanted your conquest. It invited your humility. And in that humility, you have found a different kind of warm tone that glows beneath the skin, fueled by myth and marrow, impervious to the cold that rules everything else. You dream of auroras folding and unfolding, like giant animal lungs, breathing you in, breathing you out. Somewhere inside that pulse, Sedna's hair streams upward, Sila's breath hums over ridges, Nanerlook's heartbeat thunders slow and deep. They are not mere characters in someone else's tale, they are the grammar of existence here. They shape the verbs of wind and the nouns of hunger, and as you drift, you realize the stories have not ended. They have only paused waiting for the crack of another lamp lighting, the hush of another circle gathering, the spark of another listener daring to be small under the endless polar sky. You awaken slowly, still curled in the memory of dream, as if your bones are made of snow that hasn't decided whether to stay solid or melt into mist. Outside, the wind still circles like a cautious predator, but inside, all is still. Someone is boiling broth, again fatty and rich, with that unmistakable blend of sea and smoke that makes you think of things older than comfort. The stories resume not with fanfare, but with a breath, a small gesture, a clearing of a throat that might be human or spirit. This is the way of things, here nothing starts sharply. It emerges, like a seal head breaking the surface, or a memory that was never quite forgotten. This time, the story is about Kalupalik. You feel the shape of the word before you understand Aita's slithering thing, cold and curious. Kalupalik is not a spirit in the wind or the sea. She is in the water itself, not just beneath it, not above it. She is it, in a way that makes your skin prickle, and your ankles itch as if from phantom seaweed. The Kalupalik is described as woman-shaped, but not woman-hearted. Her skin is green like fish scales, stretched thin and tight. Her hair is long and trails behind her like ink in water. She wears a quillik, a kind of parka made from eiderdown in dreams, and she hums when she nears, always humming, always close to the shoreline where the ice meets melt, where children sometimes wander too near the cracks. The elders say she loves children not to harm them, not to eat them but to keep them. She takes them under the ice, where time slows like blood in a frostbitten limb. She sings to them in that high, nasal, not quite human voice. She rocks them in crevices carved by ancient tides. Some say she feeds them bits of boiled kelp and stories from before humans had fire. Others whisper that the children become like her, growing webbed fingers and glassy eyes. But the warnings are clear. Never stray too close to the edge alone. Never go outside when the ice groans like an old woman dreaming of youth. And always, always listen for the humming. If you hear it, turn back, if you can. The Kalupalik isn't cruel. She's lonely. Some say she was once a human woman, cast into the sea for crimes forgotten, or perhaps just born wrong, in the wrong time. She is not evil, but she remembers too much. And memory, in the Arctic, is dangerous. Too much of it pulls you under. The room falls quiet after her story. A long pause. Not fear exactly, something heavier. Reverence maybe, or the knowledge that you've just brushed against something real, even if no one can prove it. Someone shifts. Another voice picks up. It is time for the Amarok. This is not a pack hunter. Number, the Amarok is a lone wolf, larger than any known creature, fur darker than a starless night. It does not howl. It does not hunt with others. It walks alone, always alone, across the ice plains and shadowed tundras, searching for those foolish enough to think themselves invisible. The Amarok does not bother the wise, the humble, or the alert, but for the arrogant, the careless, the ones who wander from the camp thinking they cannot be touched. The Amarok leaves no bones behind, just disturbed snow and a silence so deep it echoes in your dreams. Yet, as with all things here, it is not so simple as monster and victim. Some say the Amarok is not just a punisher, but a balance keeper. It is the manifestation of the land's own memory, its instincts, its immune response. To the old shamans, Amarok was a spirit of tough love, a presence that tests you, teaches you, tempers you. There are tales of hunters who survive an encounter with the Amarok and come back changed. Their eyes gleam like moonlit snow. They no longer speak much, but when they do, their words carry weight, like a harpoon in mid-flight. They become leaders, not because they claim it, but because others feel the chill that never quite left their bones. The woman across the circle, her face lined like river ice in spring, smiles faintly as she speaks of another encounter, this time not with a beast, but a helper, a being called Tornarsuk. This spirit is gentle, small, almost invisible. Some see it as a kind of guardian, especially for those who live near death but do not yet belong to it. Tornarsuk watches over the sick, the vulnerable, the nearly lost. It hums over their bodies while they sleep. It chases away bad dreams with little gusts of warm wind. It cups its hands over weak flames so they don't sputter out before morning. When someone recovers against all odds, the elders say, Tornarsuk passed through. Sometimes people build small stone stacks on lonely ridges and leave fish or seal fat there, not for the gods, not for the animals, but for the unseen. A quiet thank you, a whispered hope. You feel your throat tighten at this one. Not all spirits are terrifying. Some are soft as breath on a frost-covered cheek, but you must still respect them. Ignore Tornarsuk, and you might find your next breath stolen while you sleep. The next tale is different, more elusive. No one really knows if it's a spirit or a memory of one, but it's spoken in tones of awe. The Tupilak. Unlike Sedna or Amarok, the Tupilak isn't born of sea or sky. It is made. The word itself sends a hush through the circle. Tupilaks are spiritual weapons, forged by those who feel wronged. Created in secret from bones and feathers and the teeth of dead animals, they are animated with intention and vengeance. The one who makes a Tupilak doesn't just want justice, they want balance restored by any means. Once the creature is crafted, often in the presence of ancestral spirits, the shaman whispers a name into its empty skull, the name of the target, the source of the grievance. Then it is released, usually into the sea, where it swims, or slithers, or seeps toward the one it was meant to find. But vengeance is not tidy. If the intended victim is spiritually strong, or protected by their own spirits, the Tupilak can return to its maker, angry, confused, and just as deadly. There are stories of shamans found alone in their huts, mouths wide in horror, bodies contorted into the shapes of their own hatred. No marks, just silence, and snow drifting softly through the doorway. Tupilaks are almost never spoken of directly. It is dangerous to assume you are wise enough to understand them. They are reminders that even spirits can be twisted when fed too much bitterness. They are also reminders that the unseen world has rules, and breaking them can cost far more than you thought you were willing to pay. The wind outside shifts, rising slightly. You hear snow hiss across the outside wall of the shelter, like sand over glass. It sounds like laughter or warnings, maybe both. A young boy asks, "Are there spirits who watch the stars?" The old man across from him nods once, slowly. "Yes," he says. "There is Aningak the Moon Man. Some say he guides hunters. Others say he listens to the dreams of seals and whispers them into the ears of those who need them. His face glows softly above the sea ice, and his light falls on paths that otherwise would remain unseen. But his attention is hard to win, and harder to keep. Sometimes, when he tires of the world's noise, Aningak turns away, and the sky goes black, full of shadow. That is when the shadow weeders come out. They are not named. Not because we fear them, but because names give them direction, and you do not want them to look at you. So we sit in the dark, and we do not speak. We wait until the light returns, and with it our names. This is not a world of evil and good. It is a world of awareness. Every action is a ripple. Every spirit has memory. And when the snow covers the land remembers what you did before the snow fell. You exhale slowly. The stories do not end, but they do grow quiet again. Someone begins to hum, not a spirit, not Kalupalik, just a tired mother rocking her child beneath a blanket stitched with seal sinew. The baby murmurs. The oil lamp glows low. You realize you've been holding your shoulders too tight. You let them drop. You sip the last of your broth. The stars outside have shifted. And the stories? They are not finished with you yet. Morning in the Arctic is not marked by the sun, not always. Sometimes the light is just a slightly less dark shade of gray, and you know it's time to move because your breath no longer freezes quite as fast. But inside the shelter, time moves differently. It is measured in stories. The hearth has been stoked again, the stone lamp lit. A girl gnaws quietly on a strip of dried fish, her eyes fixed on the storyteller as if he holds back the tide. And maybe he does. Now the stories shift again. They move inland, to the cold ridges and still places where wind has worn the rocks into the shapes of sleeping things. Here dwell the Ijirak. At first, the Ijirak seem harmless, playful even. They are shapeshifters, tricksters, spirits that look like animals, until you notice something slightly off. A caribou with too many teeth. A fox that doesn't leave tracks. A raven that flies backward. They are said to appear mostly to children, to call their names from the distance, to mimic the voice of a mother or a brother. And when the child follows just a little too far, just a little too long, the Ijirak steals them away. Not forever. They return, sometimes, but they are changed. Their eyes don't always focus. They can't describe where they were, or how long they were gone. They draw symbols in the snow that melt too fast. They sing songs no one recognizes, not even the elders. It's said the Ijirak live in the liminal spaces, not in this world or the next, but in a crack between them. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, the crack widens. There are protections, of course. Charcoal drawn around sleeping places, certain plants burned in a seal oil lamp, the wearing of a parent's old amulet, or a piece of caribou bone blessed by a shaman who remembers his own brush with forgetting. But no protection is perfect. The Ijirak do not hate. They are not evil. They are simply mischievous, born from the same forces that make the ice sing at midnight, or the stars wheel in unexpected patterns. They are what happens when the world blinks, and when it opens its eyes again, you are no longer quite where you were. Another story follows, one less eerie, more tender. It is about Sela. Sela is not a spirit in the way others are. Sela is the breath of the world, the weather, the sky, the soul of the air itself. Some say Sela is a goddess. Others say Sela is the mind behind the wind, the reason snow falls in spirals and not straight lines. Sela cannot be seen, but she can be felt. When a storm arrives without warning, that is Sela thinking hard about something. When the sea calms and the ice holds steady, Sela is at peace. The old women sing her name when they walk across thin ice, not as a prayer but as a reminder. Breathe carefully, she is listening. It's said that in the old days, before people had boats or dogs or fire, they spoke directly to Sela. They would climb high cliffs and whisper into the gusts. Sometimes, the wind would stop completely, and in that silence, Sela would answer, not with words, with knowing. Now, only a few still try to speak to her. Shamans, mostly. Children, sometimes. The children are better at it. They have less to forget. You are beginning to understand that this mythology isn't made of gods and monsters. It's a mappa moral geography. It tells you where you are and what might be near you, even when you're alone. Especially then. There is a pause again. The lamp flickers. A hand reaches out to adjust it, fingers moving with practiced reverence. Then another voice deeper now starts the tale of Kivyuk. Kivyuk is not quite a man, not quite a god. He is a wanderer, a hero in the oldest sense. Curious, stubborn, never quite safe, never quite lost. He travels endlessly across the land and sea, encountering spirits, beasts, and forces of nature that would swallow a lesser person whole. His journeys are impossible yet known. He meets women who turn to ice, fights giant walruses that speak riddles, dines with the dead, and doesn't flinch when they ask for his liver. He sails in a kayak made of sealskin and songs, and somehow, always, he returns. Some say Kiviuk still lives, that he cannot die until the world ends, and that each storm that passes over the tundra is him, still moving, still searching for something only he remembers. He is not always kind, he is not always good, but he persists, and in the Arctic that may be the most sacred trait of all. Children are told stories of Kiviuk, not just for entertainment, but as instruction. Be like him, the elders say, not in how he fights, but in how he endures. Someone snorts a little at that. And in how he talks to seals, another adds. Everyone chuckles. Even now, even with spirits in the air, there is room for laughter. Laughter is protection, too. Outside, the wind picks up again. A low hum through the cracks of the sod house. The old woman nods toward the lamp and murmurs, "She's near." You know who she means, Pinga. Not everyone speaks her name aloud. She is one of the great spirits, perhaps even a goddess, though categories like that don't mean much in this place. Pinga is associated with the hunt, with medicine, and with life's balance. She sees the souls of animals and humans alike. Hunters pray to her before taking a seal or caribou. They ask for permission, not from the prey, but from Hertha, one who sees beyond the ice, beyond the blood, to the memory of the creature. If a kill is wasteful or cruel, Pinga remembers, and she does not forget. Some say she appears in dreams. Others say she arrives in the form of a bird, watching, judging. Her presence is quiet, but heavy. She does not punish, but when she withdraws her favor, the land itself becomes stingy. Traps remain empty. The ice grows brittle. Tools break. Illness spreads. She is balance. When someone heals from a sickness they were not expected to survive, the family leaves a carved ivory figure at the edge of the bay. They do not name her. They simply say, "She watched over us." There are spirits in these stories who demand blood, but Pinga is different. She demands memory. She demands intention. The old woman wraps her blanket tighter around her shoulders and smiles at you not sweetly, but knowingly. "You listen well," she says. "That is good, because there is one more you must know, one more we do not always tell." You lean closer. She begins slowly, carefully. "There are stories," she says, "of beings who live in the sky. Not stars, not ancestors, something else. Some call them the sky dwellers. They do not visit often, but when they do, everything stops. You have heard faint mentions of them. They are not evil, they are not good. They are simply outside. It's said they walk the northern lights like paths, trailing robes made of cloud. Their faces are hidden. Their voices are flutes carved from glacier wind. And when they pass overhead, even the shamans fall silent. Children are warned not to whistle at the lights. It's a small thing, but small things matter here. Whistling may draw their attention, and no one wants that. Not because the sky dwellers harm, but because they might look at you, truly look. And once they see you, you are never quite the same. One man, long ago, tried to follow them. He climbed a mountain during a storm, singing their name into the wind. When he came back, weeks later, he didn't speak. He only carved endlessly, obsessively strange symbols into bone and driftwood. He ate very little. He slept in short bursts. One day he walked into the sea, smiling. His carvings still exist, kept in a sealed box beneath an elder's bed. No one opens it. No one wants to know what's inside. You think of the lights, how they dance, how they whisper. You understand now why the old ones keep their voices low, why every tale is told like a secret. Because here, the line between myth and memory is so thin you can see the ice through it. And it stares back. The fire burns lower now. The night deepens. You are not afraid, but you are no longer just a listener. You are part of the circle now. The stories have accepted you, which means the land has too. But acceptance, like the cold, comes with a cost. The wind does not sleep, but it does shift. Outside the sod house, it has taken on a gentler rhythm, like breathing, the kind of hush that falls just before dawn, though you wouldn't know that here, not from the sun, which hides for days, but from the feeling, a subtle softening of the dark. Inside, the stories continue, they always do. Now the fire crackles lower, the smoke curls upward in lazy spirals. Someone adjusts the wick on the Quillic the stone oil lamp, and its light flickers across the storyteller's face, casting shadows that almost seem to move of their own accord. You've heard of Sedna, of Kalupalik, of Sila and Pinga. You've been warned about the Ijirak and the sky dwellers who travel with the northern lights. But tonight, one last tale lingers on everyone's tongue, though no one rushes to speak it. Because this story is not just about spirits. It is about the boundary between worlds. It begins with a crack, not in ice, not in earth, but in reality. There is a belief, old and whisper thin, that sometimes, just sometimes, the world forgets its own edges, that the walls between the living and the dead, the spirit and the body, the seen and the hidden, begin to melt. And when that happens, Tornarsuk walks through. Some call Tornarsuk a god, others a demon. Some say he is an ancient hunter who never died, cursed to walk the margins of the world, neither dead nor alive. He appears in many forms Saber, a man, a spirit of ice, always huge, always watching. But what makes Tornarsuk truly terrifying is not what he does, it's what he offers. He comes to those who are desperate, grieving, alone. He does not speak, but somehow they know. They feel it like heat in the marrow, that if they reach for him, if they accept, they will be healed, their pain will end. And often, it does. But healing is never free. Those who take Tornarsuk's bargain change, not suddenly, slowly, quietly. They become colder, not just in flesh, but in soul. Their eyes grow distant, they forget names, then faces, then their own reflection. Eventually they vanish, not into the snow but into him. Tornarsuk never leaves empty-handed. The shamans know this. That is why they leave offerings at the ice cracks during certain moons. A seal heart, a bone knife, a whispered warning. Tornarsuk does not come for everyone, only those who linger too long in sorrow. Only those who open the door from their side. This story ends without resolution. There is no great battle, no redemption, only silence. Only the knowledge that in the land of snow, grief is a powerful force and not always a private one. You exhale slowly. The air inside the house has thickened with old breath and older memories, the kind that settle in your bones and stay there. But not all stories end in shadows. There are tales told with smiles, with smirks even. These are the stories of Amarok. Amarok is not a god, not a spirit, not exactly. He is a wolf, a giant one, so large that his paw prints can hold lakes, so silent that even the snow doesn't hear him coming. He hunts alone, without a pack, and always in the deepest parts of night. But Amarok does not hunt people indiscriminately, only those who wander. Children are told, do not stray from the group, do not go out alone, not because you'll freeze, but because Amarok will find you. He does not kill for pleasure, he kills to keep balance. The elders say Amarok is nature's reminder that isolation is dangerous, that those who break away from community become more than vulnerable, they become prey. Yet Amarok is not feared, he is respected. Hunters leave meat for him when they take more than usual. Children whisper thanks to the wind when they are spared. His presence is a lesson more than a punishment. Some believe Amarok has a den somewhere under the ice, a place where he keeps the bones of those he's taken not as trophies but as records. A silent archive of every time someone forgot they were part of something larger. Even now, a boy near the fire glances toward the door, not because he expects Amarok, but because he wants to believe in him. And sometimes, belief is a kind of warmth. The stories wind down now, not with a grand finale, but like the flame of the lamp flickering to rest. There are spirits left untold, of course. There always are. The Tupilak, for one. Constructed in secrecy by dark shamans, the Tupilak is a revenge spirit, a thing made of animal parts, bone, sinew, and rage, created to punish a specific person, brought to life with incantations, blood, and willpower. But if the intended victim is stronger spiritually, emotionally the Tupilak doesn't harm them, it turns on its maker instead. That's the risk. That's the balance. It's a reminder, don't seek revenge lightly, especially in a world where thought can become form, where hate, if fed, grows legs. Some believe Tupilaks still exist, that certain artifacts hidden in cliffs, buried near sealskin graves still, carry the breath of those old rituals. If you find one, you're not supposed to touch it. Just walk away. Others believe every strong emotion has a spirit. That love becomes Iceni, a being of light that guides travelers home. That sorrow becomes a fog that hovers at sea level, trying to pull you back into your memories. That jealousy becomes sharp, like wind through a broken window. The Arctic doesn't waste anything, not even feelings. And that may be the most powerful truth of all, that in this place, everything becomes real. Dreams, regrets, stories, spirits. You think back to the first tale you heard, the girl swallowed by the sea, turned goddess, turned legend, Sedna. How she weaves through every other story, appearing in names, in rituals, in the sound of whales surfacing.
A door opens in your mind and sudden fragrance sweeps through, spiced wine warmed by desert sun, crushed petals bleeding color onto stone, resinous smoke curling like whispered secrets. For 10 heartbeats you are weightless in a cloud of memory older than language, and you realize scent alone can time travel faster than thought, slipping past every locked gate in history to show you what disappeared. You are not standing in your room anymore. You are kneeling on the hard-packed floor of a Sumerian temple around 2400 BC, where dawn is still shy and the Euphrates mutters to itself beyond reed-thatched walls. In front of you lies a shallow copper bowl. Inside, chunks of translucent resin sparkle like tiny suns as a priestess grinds them with a stone pestle. Her name is Enhedrana, poet, astronomer, high priestess of the moon god Nana, and today she mixes incense for the morning rites. She adds dried juniper berries, presses in a wedge of fragrant cedar, then drizzles a syrupy oil that smells of fig milk and fireside smoke. The bowl's scent is almost solid. You can taste sweetness in the air, feel viscosity on your tongue. When the mixture is warmed over glowing charcoal, the smoke rises in twisting ribbons, each wisp carrying a prayer encoded in molecules. The smoke clings to clay brick and braided hair, marking everyone present as momentary messengers between worlds. No written text survives describing exactly how Enhedrana recipes her fragrance, but the tablets that bear her hymns suggest she understood what many still forget. A well-made perfume is a portable temple, inviting the divine to linger wherever people tread. Drums tremble the dust beneath your knees, and suddenly you are lifted forward in time to Karnak, Egypt, around 1450 BC, under a sun fierce enough to bleach even sin's shadow. The cult of Ammonius cultivates perfumes the way an empire cultivates armies. Unctuaries, royal artisans, work in alabaster chambers, their floors slick with oils pressed from morina seeds, balanos fruit, and green olives harvested below Elephantine. They crush cassia bark, cinnamon, and cardamom traded from Punt, the land of the gods, sailing beyond the Red Sea. They stir in honey, wine, and milk until the mixture turns the color of liquid bronze. When evening cool settles over the Nile, temple servants carry cones of scented fat atop shaved heads. As the cones melt in the heat of the dancers' bodies, they drip myrrh-rich streams that perfume skin, hair, and breath. You watch a courtier inhale and close her eyes, the scent rewinding her to childhood marshes where lotus blooms broke morning's mirror. In this world, perfume is more than adornment, it is sustenance for both gods and ghosts. Votive jars filled with kifi, Egypt's most complex incense, are interred with the dead so the departed may sweeten their eternal night. Recipes chiseled on temple walls list up to 16 components: honey, raisins, juniper berries, resin of mastic, frankincense, henna, spikenard, calamus. Reading them is like hearing a choir of ingredients harmonize across centuries. Slide westward now across the Mediterranean, where a Phoenician trading ship rocks on wind-arc waves circa 900 BC. Amphorae jostle in the hold, packed with liquid luxury, cedar oil from Lebanon's high forests, pressed rose from Sidon, and the prize stacte, an extract from myrrh that fetches more silver than some towns see in a year. Sailors joke that the cargo smells so sweet even sea monsters court the vessel. Yet they guard it fiercely. Perfume is currency, diplomacy, seduction, medicine, and myth distilled into one potent fluid. When the jars reach Cyprus, perfumers decant the oils into terracotta flasks shaped like birds, hedgehogs, or deities, each spout stoppered with beeswax to seal in volatile souls. The ship's deck tilts and collapses into blackness. You surface in the agora of classical Athens, 430 BC. Plague has begun to stalk the polis, but the air still trembles with competing aromas, garlands of wild thyme, smoked garum sauce from street vendors, the charcoal tang of burnt offerings. At a small stall, a medic perfumer from Samos fans sandalwood embers beneath a bronze alembic, one of history's earliest distillation devices. He teaches that good kiffy opens the chest like philosophy opens the mind. He claims Hippocrates prescribes rose oil to cool fevers, while violet essence softens sorrow after funeral rites. Customers listen, half believing, half hoping that smell can rearrange fate's mosaic tiles. Overhead, bronze bells toll a warning, and chronology fractures again. You step into a Roman domus circa 20C, where a slave named Amina massages fragrant unguent on her mistress's arms. The unguent is a paste of saffron, cardamom, and crushed almonds steeped in oil for 30 days. The mistress sighs that the Emperor Tiberius once banned men from wearing too much perfume in public. But who will measure a woman's memory of flowers? In adjacent chambers, marble statues are anointed daily, each drip of cinnamon oil a pledge that Rome's divine order will not decay like unperfumed flesh. Yet even mighty Rome depends on distant botanicals. Through desert caravans trudging from Petra, boswellia trees bleed frankincense. From Arabia and Somalia, comifera tides pour myrrh. Camel bells clink like tiny censers, and as they pass, the sand itself begins to smell faintly ecclesiastical. In time these resins will blaze in Jerusalem's temples, Byzantium's basilicas, Mecca's markets, even London's plague-sodden streets. They will script prayers in smoke long after empires turn to ash. Leap east now to a Han Dynasty courtyard, Chang'an, 100C. A scholar unrolls silk scented with agarwood and clove. Each scroll line is brushed with ink perfumed by tuberose and musk. He believes fragrance clarifies intent so thoroughly that even a poorly written line can feel profound if it smells like moonlit jasmine. Nearby, in a bronze censer shaped like a mountain, coils a rope of incense that burns for precisely 2 hours, the perfect measure for afternoon study. Soothing plumes rise and twist into miniature dragons before vanishing. You understand why Chinese sages coined the term. Listening to incense, smoke becomes a gentle tutor, teaching stillness through evanescence. Across the Himalayas in Gupta, India, circa 375 C, the Sanskrit poet Kalidasa pens verses about lovers whose footsteps leave sandalwood ghosts on palace floors. Perfumers here distill adders by soaking rose petals in waterborne sandal oil, then heating the mixture in copper cauldrons sealed with river clay. Condensing vapors drip slowly through bamboo pipes into receivers cooled by running water. Each drop is an argument that transience can be captured, at least briefly, inside glass. The resulting rose attar is so concentrated that a single dram can scent a silk sari for a season. Spice caravans shuttle such wonders west. In Byzantium's palace gardens, Empress Theodora anoints her wrists with melilot and blackcurrant. She hosts evening receptions where air trembles with overlapping perfumes: basil from Cappadocia, rock rose from Crete, and precious ambergris washed ashore after storm-struck whales surrendered their internal thunderstones to the sea. Guests debate theology while simultaneously decoding fragrance like secret scripture. Through their talk you drift to the Umayyad Caliphate, Damascus, 710 C, where alchemists refine distillation using smooth copper stills called alembic, prosperous ancestors of the alembic. They isolate essences unimaginable to earlier ages, sweet orange blossom, peppermint, and eventually, via Avicenna's improvements, the pure rosewater that will revolutionize European perfumery during the Crusades. Traders bottle these aromas in rock crystal, each vial small enough to conceal in a palm yet powerful enough to scent a caravanserai courtyard. Meanwhile, farther north, Viking traders load Baltic amber, juniper berries, and pine tar onto longships bound for Constantinople. Among them travels a small cask of spikenard oil from India, traded 6 times before crossing the Black Sea. A skald later sings that its fragrance reminded warriors of dawn on a warm shore past the edges of maps. For men who measure life between winters, perfume offers a glimpse of immortality disguised as memory. You begin to discern a pattern. Scent is both souvenir and prophecy. It preserves what time erodes and hints at futures where gardens still bloom. So you follow it beneath medieval cathedrals, where priests fumigate altars with blends called Holy Wednesday Mix, labdanum, benzoin, storax, and rose. The smoke climbs pillars of stone, painting invisible frescoes on air. Each inhalation is half sacrament, half medicine, believed to ward off plague by sweetening corrupted miasmas. But now the sweet turns somber. A plague doctor in 14th century Paris crushes cloves, rosemary, and camphor into a vinegar base. 4 thieves vinegar, and soaks his beaked masked cotton lining, praying the aroma forms a barrier against death. We know today that it failed more than it saved, yet its scent carried placebo hope. Something no microscope can measure but every heart can smell. Time loosens again. You stand in Florence, 1533, outside the workshop of Renato Bianco, who will soon accompany Catherine de' Medici to France as her personal perfumer. He experiments with bergamot, jasmine, and civet extracted, somewhat undiplomatically, from the glands of African palm cats. He dissolves musk into wine alcohol imported from Spanish stills, thereby birthing the first modern alcohol-based perfume, Acqua della Regina, water of the Queen. When Catherine introduces it to Paris, the court swoons, until the city eventually stinks less of sewage and more of orange blossoms, an aromatic coup more lasting than any treaty. By candlelight on the same bench, Renato records formulas in a leather-bound book, each line a gamble that memory may outlive flesh. He writes of amber accord, labdanum, benzoin, vanilla, of sheeper base, oak moss, patchouli, bergamot. Words become olfactory architecture, blueprints future noses will inhabit. The candle gutters. You drift again, this time to Ayutthaya, Siam, 1690, where courtiers wear tassels soaked in ylang ylang and cura. At midnight a princess unrolls a scroll perfumed with pan and leaf. Her lover across the river will smell it before he reads it, and the scent will linger on his fingers long after the ink fades. Even betrayal here is scented, poison concealed in adders laced with arsenic, because who would suspect danger in liquid jasmine? You inhale, and the centuries collapse. You are back in your darkened room, fan humming, but the air around you glows with phantom scents, Sumerian cedar, Egyptian kithi, Chinese agarwood, Florentine bergamot. You realize the room has become a palimpsest of eras layered one atop the other, each era exhaling molecules that once circled sacred fires or royal bedchambers. And we have only uncorked the first vial. Ahead lies more. The secret groves of frankincense trees whose tears built empires. The sweaty alchemy of medieval glovemakers scenting leather so deftly that assassins hid poison beneath lavender. The forgotten perfumers of Mesoamerica, distilling copal resin and vanilla long before European sails bruised their horizons. But those stories must wait for our next encounter. Let the fragrances we have summoned swirl a while in the hush of your room. Close your eyes. Trace the smoky spiral back to Enheduanna's temple, to Cleopatra's rose-petaled Nile barges, to caravans dripping myrrh across moonlit dunes. Each breath is a bridge. each exhale a return. Sleep, if you wish, with a drop of history on your pillow. When we gather again, we will follow that aroma deeper into libraries of lost recipes and laboratories of living memory, where the past still waits in stoppered bottles, ready to rise like incense the moment someone dares to breathe. Now let's return to that ancient trail of scent. We follow it like pilgrims, guided not by stars but by what lingers in the air, soft, almost invisible, but real enough to change memory. Our path takes us now to the Americas, long before Spanish ships scraped the horizon. The Olmecs, Maya, and Aztecs, civilizations often remembered for pyramids and calendars, were also master perfumers. Their scents did not come in cut glass bottles but smoldered on altars and clung to feathers, stones, and skin. Copal was the sacred resin of choice, harvested from the Becerra tree. When burned, it gave off a sweet, sharp smoke, like citrus bruised under sunlight. The Maya called it palm, and it was not merely pleasant, it was divine breath. In Tikal or Palenque, priests stood before towering stone masks of gods, swinging censers that painted the air with shimmering clouds. The smoke rose like a staircase. To smell copal during a ceremony was to believe the gods were near enough to touch. In Aztec Tenochtitlan, nobles chewed sweetened chicle and rubbed themselves with fragrant oils made from ashin, the musk-like secretion from native animals, and blended it with powdered flowers or even cacao. They believed cleanliness and sweet aroma were signs of inner virtue, and offending others with body odor was considered both uncivil and spiritually impure. Further north, among the Pueblo peoples, juniper and pinyon sap were burned in dark kivas, ceremonial chambers carved into the earth. These were not just pleasant smells, they were calls to ancestors, invitations to the past to sit beside the present. The idea that aroma could bend time, invite memory, and shape identity is not unique. It is universal. Scent travels through culture like smoke under a door, quiet, persistent, and often overlooked until it fills the room. So, let us drift across oceans again, to medieval Baghdad around the 9th century CE. The House of Wisdom buzzes with scribes, mathematicians, and physicians, many of whom are also experimenting with distillation and scent. The Persian polymath Al-Kindi compiles a book of the chemistry of perfume and distillations, describing hundreds of recipes for scented oils, salves, and waters. Some are healing balms. Some are for delight. Others are for preparing the dead. Rosewater becomes a centerpiece. Roses, damask dark, velvet-petaled, are crushed and steam distilled in copper alembics. The process is refined here. Steam rises, carrying volatile oils into a coiled pipe, where it condenses and cools into fragrant water. The result is pure, soft, and treasured. Rosewater is splashed on guests, added to drinks, and even sprinkled on streets before festivals. If you lived in Baghdad at the time, you would associate the smell of roses not with romance, but with learning, hospitality, and peace. In nearby Damascus, glassmakers create delicate vials to hold these precious liquids. The bottles themselves become miniature temples of scent. Their colors, cobalt blue, emerald green, clear crystal, help preserve the contents, as sunlight could rob a perfume of its soul. Artisans learned that even the container matters. Fragrance cannot live in just anything, it needs the right home, just like memory. Meanwhile, in India, the art of attar making deepens. Traditional perfumers, known as Gandhis, no relation to the political name you know, specialize in hydrodistillation. Their methods are precise yet poetic. Rose petals are placed in large copper pots, filled with water, and sealed with a mixture of clay and cotton. Heat is applied, steam rises, and the vapor is directed into flasks of sandalwood oil, where it condenses and marries into attar. This process can take hours, sometimes days. The resulting perfume is not overwhelming. It whispers. It lingers like a thought you can't quite let go of. Attars are worn behind the ears, in the crook of the elbow, or pressed into fabric. Unlike modern alcohol-based sprays, they mature on the skin, warming and changing as the body changes. An attar applied at dawn may smell different by dusk, not because it fades, but because it travels. Lovers might share the same scent, and entire families could be known by the perfume that floated gently behind them. In Mughal courts, emperors wore custom-blended attars. Emperor Jahangir once wrote of a scent that reminded him of the breath of paradise touched by thunder. We pause now in Renaissance Venice, where merchants gather rare aromatics from every corner of the known world. The city itself smells of salt water, aged wood, and open markets. But behind shuttered windows, noble women dab perfumes into the lace of their sleeves and inside their gloves. The scents help mask the less charming odors of a city built on canals and fishmongers. Venice becomes a crossroads where east meets west, where myrrh from Yemen, musk from Tibet, and civet from Ethiopia pass hands through whispers and silver. Perfume here is not just for beauty. It's for power. A Venetian courtesan may wear ambergris, the waxy substance excreted by sperm whales and aged by sun and sea. Ambergris smells of ocean, leather, and musk all at once, and it lingers on skin for days. It's considered magical, almost scandalous in potency. Even in death, scent plays a role. Perfumed cloths are wrapped around bodies before burial. Churches burn resin-rich incense until the stone columns reek of salvation. Scent, once again, becomes both farewell and promise. Let us now ascend into the French Alps in the 17th century. In the small town of Grasse, the air grows heavy with lavender, orange blossom, and jasmine. Gloves, perfumed to mask the scent of tanned leather, are exported across Europe. The combination is so popular that it births an entire industry. Leather gloves lined with scent are given to queens and lovers. Eventually, the perfume outshines the gloves. By the time of Louis XIV, the French court is utterly saturated in aroma. The king himself demands scented fountains, perfumed furniture, and an entire department of nose artists to concoct new blends. Courtiers dab perfume on clothes, handkerchiefs, even their wigs. It is said the palace at Versailles smelled like roses in the morning, cinnamon by noon, and civet by supper. Of course, underneath it all, there was also the faint reek of unwashed bodies, because bathing was still rare. In many cases, perfume didn't just accent the body, it defended it. In those same gilded halls, a woman might carry a vinaigrette, a small container filled with aromatic vinegar and herbs to revive her if the air grew too foul or overwhelming. This was not only practical, it was ritual. The action of inhaling perfume was theatrical, part of a larger language of class, grace, and mystery. Even swooning could be scented. Let us now step outside of Europe for a moment, southward to the rainforests of Southeast Asia. Here, deep in the damp shade, agarwood trees grow quietly until wounded. It is only when the tree is infected or injured that it begins to produce the dark, resinous heartwood known as oud. Oud smells like ancient temples, rain on dry leaves, and time itself. It is one of the most expensive perfume ingredients in the world. In Buddhist and Hindu traditions, oud is burned in sacred rites. In Islamic culture, it is revered for its grounding, purifying essence. A small piece of oud, no larger than your thumb, may sell for hundreds of dollars. Yet in many places, it is offered freely during religious holidays, burned in homes and mosques to bless the air. Its scent is not showy. It is contemplative, meant to anchor the soul. Let us not forget Africa. In Somalia and Eritrea, women blend frankincense and myrrh into hot coals placed in clay burners. They sit over the smoke, letting the scent rise through their clothing and hair. This is known as degdeg, and it is both beauty ritual and spiritual cleansing. The scent clings to fabric for days, marking a woman with the sacred aroma of home. Meanwhile, in Morocco, perfumers craft musk amber blends, thick pastes of resin and animal-derived musk stored in gold-trimmed jars. These are not perfumes in the modern sense. They are time capsules, slowly releasing their scent with every pulse and breeze. And in Ethiopia, ancient churches burn etan, a special blend of resins and herbs. during midnight mass, so the entire congregation becomes suspended in invisible light. So many stories, and we haven't even reached the 18th century. But you begin to see the theme. No matter the region or time period, scent shapes identity. It carries memory, signals emotion, and sometimes masks the unspeakable. And it does all of this invisibly. That is the paradox of perfume. It has no color, no mass, and no voice, yet it speaks louder than drums when remembered. As we end this part of the journey, the air around you is filled with what once was, hints of burned resins, crushed petals, and sacred oils. Close your eyes. Maybe something from earlier still lingers. Myrrh, rose, jasmine, or that strange, elusive oud. We've only just begun to unravel this thread through time. In the next chapter, we will cross into the modern era, when chemistry replaces mysticism, when perfume becomes commerce, and when a scent can travel across oceans in glass bottles shaped like desire. But for now, let that invisible library of aroma rest in your mind. The story continues just beyond the next breath. And now, dear listener, let us step into the age when scent became science, when the mysterious art of perfumery slowly emerged from temple shadows and entered the clean, white light of laboratories and commercial trade. The ancient rituals did not vanish, but they were distilled, both literally and figuratively, into new forms. The shift was slow, like a new perfume settling onto the skin. We begin our journey in the 18th century, in a city that would become synonymous with luxury, Paris. Here, apothecaries and alchemists line the narrow streets, selling fragrant waters under the guise of medicinal tonics. Eau de Cologne, for example, originally claimed to cure everything from headaches to melancholy. A light blend of citrus oils, lavender, and rosemary, it was created in Germany but flourished in France. Napoleon Bonaparte, it's said, ordered hundreds of bottles a month, bathing in it, almost literally. He wasn't alone. Perfume was becoming a daily habit among the elite. No longer just for ceremonies or spiritual purposes, scent was now part of personal hygiene, or the performance of it, at least. Bathing was still rare, so fragrance filled the gap. In aristocratic circles, it became common to carry perfumed handkerchiefs, to scent one's wigs, gloves, undergarments, even the powder used on faces. But behind this fragrant fantasy was an increasingly industrial process. In Grasse, that small town in the south of France we visited earlier, flower fields were now being cultivated not for pleasure, but production. Entire hillsides bloomed with jasmine, rose, orange blossom, and tuberose. Workers, often women and children, rose before dawn to pluck the delicate petals before the sun could damage their oils. The work was long, quiet, and careful. Each flower had to be harvested at exactly the right moment, or it would be worthless. These petals were then brought to the perfumer's workshop for enfleurage, an old method of extracting fragrance using fat. Glass plates were smeared with odorless animal fat, and flower petals were carefully laid onto them, changed out daily until the fat absorbed the scent. The resulting pomade was then washed in alcohol to separate the perfume oils. It was delicate work. Days of labor for just a few drops of aroma. But those drops could sell for more than gold. Still, for all its beauty, this system was fragile. Nature was moody. Crops failed. War disrupted trade routes. And some ingredients, like musk from the glands of deer or civet cats, required cruelty. In the 19th century, perfumers began asking a dangerous question: could we make these scents in a laboratory instead? The answer was yes. In 1868, a French chemist named Albert Bauer synthesized musk ketone, an artificial substitute for natural musk. Suddenly, perfume could be made without animals. Around the same time, chemists discovered compounds like coumarin, the sweet scent of newly mown hay, and vanillin, the key molecule behind the smell of vanilla. These new tools opened an entire universe of possibilities. No longer limited by what could be squeezed or distilled from plants, perfumers could now build scent from the molecule up. designing fragrances that had never existed in nature. This gave rise to a new kind of perfumer, the nose. A person not just trained in botany or trade, but chemistry, psychology, and art. The first synthetic perfume to gain real fame was Fougue Royale in 1882, created by Paul Parquet for Hubigant. It smelled of lavender, oak moss, and a crisp synthetic called coumarin. It wasn't trying to copy nature. It was trying to invent something new. By the turn of the century, perfume was no longer just a luxury, it was an industry. Let's pause now in 1921, when a new scent was released in Paris that would change everything, Chanel No. 5. Created by Ernest Bose for Coco Chanel, it combined aldehydes, sharp, fizzy synthetics, with rose and jasmine in a way that smelled clean, modern, and shockingly bold. It didn't evoke a flower. It evoked a mood. Marilyn Monroe would later claim she wore nothing but Chanel No. 5 to bed. A single sentence, and the perfume became a legend. But behind the legend was a revolution. Chanel No. 5 was the first major perfume to lean heavily on synthetic components, and the public adored it. As the 20th century advanced, perfume houses sprang up like wildflowers: Guerlain, Coty, Dior, Estée Lauder, all competing to bottle desire, elegance, and fantasy. Packaging became an art. Glassmakers like Lalique designed bottles that were as treasured as the scent inside. Perfume was now sold as personality in a bottle. A scent wasn't just for smelling good anymore, it was a statement, an identity, a weapon even. But even as chemistry soared, many noses still turned back to history. The past had left clues. In Egypt, archaeologists discovered ancient perfume jars sealed for millennia. When opened, they still held faint traces of scent. In 2018, scientists at the University of Hawaii recreated the perfume of Cleopatra herself, based on residue found in ancient vessels from a perfumery site in Inuit. The result? A rich, spicy, almost leathery scent, nothing like modern florals. Heavy, earthy, regal. The kind of perfume that announces you before you even speak. Scent, once thought too fleeting to record, was finally being resurrected. Meanwhile, in the Middle East and South Asia, traditional perfume making never stopped. In India, Ada craftsmen in Kannauj continued to distill rose, vetiver, and curry using centuries-old methods. In Oman, frankincense is still harvested by hand. In Japan, the ritual of kodo, the way of fragrance, is still practiced, where participants listen to incense in silence, as if it were music. Even in the most modern labs, perfumers study these ancient traditions like scripture. Because for all our synthetics and machines, something about scent remains fundamentally human, fragile, personal, impossible to fully define. Let us pause now, not in space, but in sensation. Think of a moment, a real one from your life, when scent changed everything. Maybe it was the way your grandmother's closet smelled of cedar and lavender. Maybe it was a certain cologne that lingered on someone's scarf. Maybe it was a particular shampoo that reminded you of a summer decades ago. The nose does not forget. Scents enter the brain through the limbic system, directly linked to emotion and memory. That's why you can forget a face, a name, a date, but never the smell of someone you once loved. And now, perfumes are more personal than ever. Niche perfume houses create custom blends for individual clients. Others bottle oddities: wet concrete, burned sugar, books, lipstick, even the smell of space. Yes, NASA once commissioned a company to recreate the scent of outer space, described by astronauts as gunpowder, ozone, and seared steak. That too was bottled. We have come a long way from myrrh burned in stone temples. And yet, in some way, we haven't moved at all. We still light incense to invite peace. We still dab fragrance before a date. We still choose smells that make us feel stronger, softer, bolder, safer. Perfume remains one of the last true forms of invisible expression. A language without words, a signature made not in ink, but in air. we'll end this chapter here, just at the edge of the present moment. You now know the winding, centuries-long path of scent, from sacred rituals to synthetic molecules, from royal courts to dusty bazaars. But one part still remains, the future of fragrance. In our final chapter, we'll explore what happens next. Scent in the digital age. Memory encoded in molecules. And how modern perfumers are looking backward to move forward. So rest now. Let the history swirl around you like a cloud of rosewater and sandalwood. You are breathing stories older than empires. And the final breath of this tale is just ahead. So here we are, at the final breath of the story, though of course, it's not really the end. Because the history of scent, like the scent itself, never truly finishes. It lingers. And as we drift into the present moment and peer toward the future, we find ourselves asking the same quiet question that perfumers have asked for thousands of years. How do you bottle a memory? In today's world, perfume is both everywhere and nowhere. It's in department stores, magazine ads, subway tunnels. It's sprayed in hotel lobbies to trigger calm and in casinos to encourage risk. Retail stores scent the air with specific notes: lemon for energy, vanilla for comfort, sandalwood for luxury, all carefully calculated, quietly persuasive. Scent marketing, they call it. And it's big business. Your nose, once a private thing, is now part of the modern economy. Companies create signature smells, not just logos or colors. Singapore Airlines scents their planes and flight attendant scarves with a custom floral blend called Stefan Floridian Waters. In Las Vegas, casinos scent the air with combinations of green tea and fig, meant to mask the stress of gambling and keep you playing longer. Hotels, gyms, even hospitals have adopted these invisible branding tools. But this isn't manipulation so much as continuation. After all, the ancient Egyptians also perfumed their homes, and Romans sprinkled their banquet rooms with rosewater. The difference now is scale. Today, we don't just smell what's near, we smell what's been designed. At the same time, technology is reshaping what's possible. Scientists have created scent-emitting devices that can sync with movies, virtual reality, or even social media. These aren't science fiction anymore. They exist. A device can now release a puff of cinnamon when your phone shows a memory from a winter holiday, or trigger lavender when your meditation app begins. It's called digital olfaction, and it's still in its infancy. But researchers believe smell may one day be streamed like music. Entire scent playlists, memory vaults, emotional triggers, a digital library of your life, recorded not in photos or words, but in aroma. Even more astonishing are the projects involving artificial intelligence. Modern perfumers are now using AI algorithms to design new scent combinations. Machines can analyze thousands of ingredients, compare their molecular structures, and propose formulas that no human nose would think of on its own. This doesn't mean perfumers are being replaced, only that their tools are changing. A good nose still relies on intuition, memory, and emotion. But AI can expand the palette. Imagine being able to say, "I want a perfume that smells like my grandmother's attic in late August," and having a machine suggest the perfect combination of dust, cedar, dried roses, and sun-warmed books. Memory made literal. But even in the swirl of technology, many perfumers are turning back to tradition, back to natural ingredients, and back to stories. There is now a global movement towards slow perfumery, where small batches are made by hand, with local botanicals and ancient methods. These artisan scents don't come in fancy bottles or with celebrity endorsements. They come with stories. A perfumer might harvest lavender from her own garden, or distill resin in the same copper alembic used by her grandfather. There's also a growing awareness of sustainability. Many of the most precious ingredients, like oud, sandalwood, or musk, are under threat from overharvesting. Some trees take decades to mature before they yield scent. So now, ethical perfume makers are finding alternatives. They're planting sustainable groves, or crafting synthetic versions that preserve the smell without harming the source. Because even if you love the scent of something, that love shouldn't destroy it. Then there's memory preservation through perfume, a relatively new idea that combines neuroscience and scent design. Imagine a dying loved one whose unique scent is captured and recreated so that their family can remember them more vividly. Or a bride who wears a one-of-a-kind fragrance on her wedding day that she'll never wear again, just so that the memory remains sharp and sacred. There are perfumers now who specialize in exactly this, custom scents that are never duplicated, worn for one moment, and then sealed away. A love letter written in aroma. A funeral elegy that lingers longer than tears. And as we begin to understand more about how scent works in the brain, how it bypasses logic and language and lands directly in the limbic system, we also begin to understand its power. Not as decoration, not as branding, but as the closest thing we have to time travel. A single whiff can undo decades. You might smell an old perfume and suddenly you're 9 years old, hiding in the folds of your mother's coat. Or you smell pencil shavings, and suddenly it's the first day of school again, your name written carefully on a notebook you were afraid to use. No photograph can do that. No song. Only scent. So what does the future hold? Maybe we'll have rooms that adjust scent to match our mood. Maybe we'll wear emotion-sensing bracelets that emit calming aromas when we're anxious. Maybe perfume will become part of therapy, prescribed like medicine, to help treat trauma or guide memory loss. Some of this is already happening. Clinical studies are exploring the use of lavender, bergamot, and frankincense in anxiety and dementia care. Others are recreating childhood scents for patients with Alzheimer's, trying to tether them gently to the present through the past. And perhaps most remarkably, archaeologists and chemists are working together to bring ancient scents back to life. Using chemical residue found in tombs, amphorae, and ceramic jars, they're reconstructing perfumes from Babylon, from Greece, from ancient China. The lab becomes a time machine. And the first inhale is like a whisper from someone long dead. They say scent has no form, no shape, no voice. But they are wrong. Scent is the voice of the forgotten, the language of the unrecorded. It tells you what no scroll or fresco can. What the palace smelled like during a coronation. What a young woman in Babylon wore to impress her lover. What the temple air felt like when the high priest entered with myrrh smoke trailing behind him. Scent is history made intimate. And it always has been. So now, as this long and winding tale settles, take one more breath. Imagine the air in ancient Egypt, thick with frankincense and Nile breeze. Or the alleys of 14th century Grasse, where jasmine baskets overflowed. Or the Mughal palace gardens, just before dawn, where attar waited patiently to be poured on royal wrists. And now your own breath. Your own room. Your own memory of a scent so personal, no one else would understand it. That is perfume's final gift. It belongs to you and no one else. It is public and private, sacred and playful. It connects you to strangers long gone and anchors you to the moment you're living in. Thank you for walking this invisible trail with me. Until next time, breathe easy. And listen closely. Because sometimes, history smells like home. A train whistle you can't quite hear slices the dark. A low moan of iron and hope that trembles through your bones even though no locomotive will ever ride these rails. In the hush that follows, you taste river fog, wood smoke, and the electric fear of footfalls and midnight brush. And you know freedom is not a place but a direction carved by courage in the dark. Your story begins on a sweltering July evening in 1843, in the low country of South Carolina, where the air is so thick with humidity it feels like another layer of skin. You crouch beside a rough-hewn cabin, heart pounding with a rhythm not your own. It belongs to every ancestor who ever prayed for sky beyond cotton fields. Cicadas buzz like faulty lanterns in the trees, and the moon, swollen and watchful, paints the world in bone-white gloss. Behind you, an overseer's lantern bobbles along a row of newly topped tobacco plants. but the circle of firelight never quite reaches your hiding place. Tonight, that tiny mercy feels like a covenant with the stars. For years you have gathered hints like threadbare scraps, a whispered hymnal verse about crossing Jordan, a chalk arrow scratched onto a fence post, the briefest squeeze of a stranger's hand in church. It adds up to something that isn't quite a map but feels just as certain. You and your sister, Clara, barely 16, tasting grown woman defiance for the first time, have memorized the constellations the way some people memorize psalms. The Big Dipper's handle tilts westward tonight. It will pour you north if you keep walking. Clara presses a bundle into your arms, a strip of salt pork, a heel of cornbread wrapped in cloth, 2 gourds, a battered compass missing its lid. Neither of you knows how to read it properly, but turning the little arrow feels like petitioning a silent god. You bury the compass in your pocket anyway. Faith can be broken, but metal remembers north even when humans forget. You slip through rows of corn, the stalks whispering against your shoulders like gossips too shocked to speak aloud. Every step is a prayer that dogs don't howl, that the pigs stay asleep, that the creek ahead muffles your tracks. You think of Harriet Tubman, the woman they call Moses, who led people out of bondage not with a staff but with an old revolver and songs coded like prophecy. You have never seen her, but her legend prickles across your skin as if the woman herself has reached back to steady your spine. She said she never lost a passenger. Tonight you plan to prove the record stays unbroken. At the creek you strip off shoes made of burlap and hope. The water is warm, sluggish, heavy with tadpoles. Clara steps first, winces at unseen stones, then grips your elbow. The current carries away footprints and scatters what little noise you make. On the far bank, moss-draped cypress trees huddle in a hush as deep as any cathedral. You push on barefoot, guided by frog song and radiant insects that flicker like sparks flung from the forge of heaven. By dawn you've traveled 5 miles, a small miracle. You nestle under sweet gum branches, chewing cornbread so dry it sands your tongue. Clara hums. Steal away. Soft as breath, the melody curling above you like incense. In the hush between notes, you hear wagon wheels on a road beyond the brush. White men, maybe. Or maybe angels disguised in dust. You dare not look. Sleep overtakes you not like a blanket but a collapse. In dreams you're running barefoot through snow you've never touched, chasing a promise you've never met. When you wake, the air is bright with late morning heat and the earthy perfume of damp pine needles. Clara nudges you. Time to move. You follow fence lines that lean like old men, skirting cabins where enslaved laborers hoe in silence. Occasionally a child watches you from a doorway, curiosity carved into their brow. You lift a finger to your lips, then point north. Sometimes the child nods. Sometimes they vanish inside, perhaps to whisper to their mother that 2 shadows drifted by like cranes heading home. The first safe place arrives at dusk 3 days later, a clapboard church outside Fayetteville, its steeple crooked as if leaning to eavesdrop on secrets. A candle flickers in the basement window, 3 short blinks, a pause too long. The code matches what you were told. It signals water, food, a floor to rest upon. Inside, a Quaker couple with gentle eyes and calloused hands hands you tin cups of buttermilk that tastes like forgiveness chilled. They wash your feet, dab the blisters with goose fat, press lumps of brown sugar into your palms. Clara sinks onto a burlap cot, tears streaking her dust-caked cheeks. The woman, Mrs. Whitlow, hums an old lullaby about seashells and sparrows. You fall asleep wondering if sparrows know they are free. In the small hours the Quakers wake you. A patrol rides tonight, they warn. Hounds that bite first and howl later. They usher you into a crawl space beneath the floorboards, where you crouch amid root vegetables, breathing soil and onions. Bootsteps clomp overhead. Lantern beams slice the darkness through gaps in the planks. A guttural voice curses the Whitlows for abolitionist meddling. You think of your mother, who once told you that the worst kind of master was the one who feared his own conscience. The boots leave. Silence blooms. Mr. Whitlow lifts the floorboard and whispers, "Go before dawn." You head for the Cape Fear River, guided now by a small scrap of parchment the Whitlows pressed into your hand. Follow the river 10 miles. Look for a sycamore split by lightning, then wait for a courier named Benjamin. The river's surface gleams like oil in moonlight. You and Clara paddle a stolen John boat, each stroke ripping silver scars across the water. Somewhere upstream an owl echoes your breath, as if urging you onward. Benjamin meets you at the shattered sycamore, a tall man wearing a burlap sack coat and a grin wide enough to hold sunrise. He introduces himself only once, then tells stories every step afterward. Tales of a formerly enslaved preacher in Ohio who hides runaways under his pulpit, of a one-armed blacksmith in Kentucky who forged iron shoes backward for horses so slave catchers followed tracks south instead of north, of free black sailors in Boston who fund secret dormitories above sail lofts. He speaks to Clara when she stumbles, to you when doubt gnaws. Stories, you realize, are rungs on a ladder invisible to those who never needed to climb. Days blur. You sleep in tobacco barns, in hollowed poplar logs, in half-built attics where hammers rest mid-swing as if waiting for history to catch up. You learn to read signs, the shape of pigeon nests under eaves, the tilt of chimney stones on farmhouse roofs, the pattern of nails hammered into fence rails, all subtle messages from the underground's silent telegraph. You carry passwords like fragile eggshells. Friends of friends, left hand on the plow, box of quilts for Baltimore. Some nights you pass Quakers who refuse to shake hands, believing human contact too intimate, yet who risk prison to drive you 15 miles hidden under sweet hay. Other nights you find free black families who open doors without question, feeding you collard spiced with quiet defiance. One evening Benjamin ushers you into a candlelit cellar beneath an apothecary in Richmond. There you meet Mary Elizabeth Bowser, a woman whose eyes flicker with keen intelligence behind servant's garb. She tidies jars of licorice root and sassafras while explaining she soon travels south as a spy in Jefferson Davis's Confederate White House. Her memory, she says, is as strong as any ink. She will read documents upside down, then recite them verbatim to Union generals come nightfall. You believe her utterly. She tightens the laces on Clara's shoes, murmuring, "Knowledge slips through cracks bullets can't reach." When you leave, she presses dried lavender into your pocket. The scent follows for miles, masking fear. In Maryland's dense pine woods you nearly lose everything. Hounds crash through underbrush, jaws frothing. You sprint until your lungs shred. Clara trips on a root, twists an ankle. Benjamin fires his pistol skyward. It's empty, but the cracking report startles the dogs long enough to gain ground. You find a shallow marsh, wade waist deep, smear mud across skin to drown scent. The hounds circle, baffled, then wander off, howling their frustration at oak trunks. When dawn arrives, Benjamin laughs so softly it sounds like a prayer of astonishment. "Your mama named you right," he tells Clara. "Clear as a bell, you rang freedom and the dogs got confused by the echo." Past Baltimore the air changes, cooler, tinged with brine from distant bays. White abolitionists join the relay now, wearing solemn expressions and coats perfumed by tobacco smoke and ink. One of them gives you a forged travel pass naming you Jacob Turner, manservant, Pennsylvania visiting family. The handwriting is elegant, lying with perfect posture. It frightens you how easily a quill can invent identity. At the Susquehanna River you encounter William Still, a clerk with spectacles perched on a nose that seems carved for justice. He quizzes you on dates, kinfolk, scars, meticulous records destined for a ledger he hides beneath loose floorboards. "One day," he says, "people will need proof that we lived." He offers you railroad tickets, real ones this time, to Philadelphia. Clara clutches them like scripture. You step onto the passenger car, heart hammering as conductors stride past. No one questions the passes. Steam shrieks, wheels grind, and suddenly you are moving faster than you ever dreamed, iron narrowing distance like a folding map. Philadelphia smells of coal, soot, and possibility. Colored churches ring bells each time a new soul arrives. You sleep one night in the basement of Mother Bethlehem, where a preacher's booming prayer rattles the window panes. Deliver them, Lord, from Pharaoh's lash. At dawn, you meet a man called Dr. Smith, who examines Clara's swollen ankle, wraps it in clean bandage, and hands her a pair of second-hand walking boots. He whispers, "Canada waits." But freedom begins the moment you breathe without permission. The journey is far from over, yet something shifts inside you. Each mile north feels lighter, as though gravity loosens. You begin to notice small signs of progress. Black children walking to school with books, white barbers shaving colored customers, abolitionist newspapers hawked openly on street corners. But rumors swirl, new laws hunt fugitives even in these streets. So you push on. And here, just as you reach the banks of the Niagara, with mist rising like ghostly applause, part one of your passage closes. The roar of the falls drowns memory, but not anticipation. Across the water, Canada gleams like a shard of moon trapped in river glass. You taste its cool spray on your lips and wonder if freedom has a flavor, and if so, whether it tastes anything like this mingling of fear, hope, and endless falling water. You cross into Canada just before dawn, when the world is still draped in its softest shadows. The ferry rocks gently beneath your feet, and though it's no more than a flat raft tied to a rope pulley system, to you it feels like a royal barge. The boatman, a silent black man with a wide-brimmed hat and weather-worn hands, does not speak. He doesn't need to. His every motion, pulling the rope, steadying the plank, nodding once as you pass, feels sacred. Clara clutches your hand so tightly you wonder if her fingers might leave marks. You welcome them. As the boat kisses the Canadian shore, something strange happens. The boatman reaches into his coat and withdraws a small tin bell. He rings it once, clear and sharp, then sets it beside your feet. No words. No fanfare. Just that pure chime ringing freedom into the fog. You stoop, pick it up, and tuck it into your pocket. Later, you will discover that dozens before you have received the same bell, passed from hand to hand like a relic, a sacred whisper of survival. The first few days in Canada are disorienting. Not because of danger, but because danger has been your constant companion for so long. Without it, you're unsure how to move. Every window without bars, every white face without scorn, every church without overseers feels like a dream. In the town of St. Catharines, you meet other freedom seekers, men and women with stories stitched into their skin and eyes that scan the horizon even when the sky is calm. They welcome you, not with fanfare, but with quiet nods, bowls of hot soup, and work. You begin again by chopping wood. It's grueling, repetitive, and oddly comforting. Clara finds a place mending clothes at a nearby inn. The first coin she earns, tarnished, bent, she presses into your palm like treasure. You keep it. But freedom here is not easy. It is not a golden key that unlocks a palace. It is a long, slow unraveling of fear. The Canadian winters bite hard. The wind cuts deeper than overseers' whips ever did. Work is scarce, and suspicion lingers, even among abolitionists. Clara comes home one evening with tears frozen on her cheeks. A white patron refused to let her touch their garments. You hold her close, the way your mother once held you during a thunderstorm, both of you understanding that storms don't end just because you cross a line on a map. Still, you build something, brick by brick, story by story. In the evenings, you gather at the church, not just for prayer, but for information. Who's come up from Ohio? Who needs a place to hide? Who was captured by bounty hunters pretending to be preachers? You learn that the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 has changed everything. It reaches its claws even into free states. Slave catchers, emboldened, are snatching men and women from northern streets like wolves in sheep's clothing. Canada, it seems, is the last true shelter. And yet, even here, fear is not gone. One night, word spreads that a man named Josiah has been taken. He'd ventured south of the border to find his brother. You remember the way he laughed, always too loud, always with both arms open. Now he's gone. His empty chair at the church potluck feels heavier than any sermon. Still, the underground does not stop. The network shifts, strengthens, evolves. You begin helping others who cross the line, offering what little you have, a bed of straw, a warm meal, a kind word. You teach them the songs you once followed. Wade in the water, go down Moses. Melodies woven with warning, hope, and encoded directions. You meet a woman named Eliza who walked alone from Kentucky to Detroit with nothing but a rag doll and a whistle. She stays 2 nights with you, then vanishes into the woods like smoke. A week later, word comes back. She made it to Owen Sound. The doll now rests on her daughter's shelf. One evening, an older man named Lewis sits beside you by the fire. His beard is white as river frost, and he speaks with the slow certainty of someone who's walked every mile twice. He tells you the story of Henry Box Brown, a man who literally mailed himself from Richmond to Philadelphia in a wooden crate, 3 feet long, 2 feet wide. Spent 27 hours folded like a prayer. Survived. Arrived singing. You laugh, then stop. You realize something. Every person here has survived the impossible. Not just once, but again and again. And you begin to understand what freedom really is. Not the absence of chains, but the presence of purpose. Months pass. Then years. The Civil War begins in 1861. You hear about it first from a preacher's newspaper. Rebellion in the South. The headline reads, Lincoln elected. Men speak of emancipation, of Union victories, of blood spilled like wine across fields that once grew cotton. You want to believe the end is near, that the great iron gates of bondage are creaking open. Clara does not wait. She joins the Ladies' Relief Society, sewing uniforms for the U.S. colored troops. You volunteer at a printing press in Windsor, typesetting abolitionist pamphlets. One night, as you ink the words, Freedom for All, you pause. You realize that once, those letters would have been dangerous. Now they are your trade, your livelihood, your revenge. The war rages for 4 years. Through telegrams and smuggled letters, you hear of men like Robert Smalls, who stole a Confederate ship and delivered it to Union forces. Of Sojourner Truth, who demanded equal rights from the White House lawn. Of Harriet Tubman again, now leading military raids through swamps she once crept through with trembling fugitives in tow. You wonder if she remembers every face. You suspect she does. In 1863, word spreads that President Lincoln has signed the Emancipation Proclamation. It reaches your ears on a snowy morning, when a Quaker named Thomas rushes into the print shop with red cheeks and tears in his beard. It's done, he gasps. It's begun. But it isn't quite over. The proclamation frees only those in rebelling states. Not those in border states. Not those already kidnapped into the deep south. Still, it cracks the door, and you feel air rushing through the gap. Then, at last, April 1865. The war ends. General Lee surrenders. Lincoln is assassinated days later, and the country reels. But amid the mourning, something astonishing blooms, the 13th Amendment. Slavery, it says, is abolished. Not just here or there, but everywhere. You are 37 years old. Clara is married now. Her husband, Nathaniel, is a teacher, a former runaway from Georgia with a scar shaped like a question mark on his shoulder. They have a child. A girl. They name her Liberty. One summer evening, you walk down to the same river you first crossed. You take the tin bell from your coat, the one the boatman gave you all those years ago. It's dulled now, nicked, worn smooth by time and fingers. You ring it once. Just once. The sound carries across the water like a declaration. Like a promise fulfilled. But you do not toss it into the river. No. You return it to your pocket. Because others will need it still. Because the work is not finished. You join a society in Toronto helping formerly enslaved people reunite with lost family. The letters are endless. Have you seen my mother Dinah? Does anyone know the fate of Thomas, sold in Charleston? Seeking word of my son, Jackson, age 12, last seen in Memphis. Every inquiry is a stone placed in your chest. Every match a quiet miracle. And here's something you don't expect. Some people return to the South. Not to live in chains again, but to teach. To rebuild. To claim what was stolen. They risk everything again, this time not for escape, but for restoration. You think of going back, just once. To see the land that held your youth. To visit the trees that hid your flight. But you never do. Some places, even after freedom, remain haunted. Some ghosts are better left with the soil that bore them. Instead, you keep building, writing, teaching. Your story becomes part of a quilt of others, stitched by survivors, rebels, saints, and quiet heroes. And late one night, years after the world has changed, a young boy knocks on your door. He is cold, trembling, eyes wide. He has crossed a border of his own, fleeing not slavery but hatred. You offer him bread. You give him your old blanket. And without thinking, you slip the tin bell into his hand. He looks up at you, confused. What's this for? You smile, soft and tired. For whatever comes next, you say. Just ring it when you need to remember. And so, in the soft hush of the second part of your journey, the underground becomes more than tunnels and signs. It becomes a memory passed like a torch. It becomes a whisper in the dark. It becomes history, the kind that hides beneath the surface but never stops moving. Not truly. The bell rings once more in the night. And you listen. You don't remember the exact day you began to be called an elder. It just happened gradually. One day, you're stacking firewood behind the church, and the next, someone's asking you to speak at a meeting, or to hold a baby during a dedication, or to weigh in when folks argue about which crops to plant. It's not that you feel old. Your hands are still strong, your back only bends a little when the weather turns. But the weight of years is real, like layers of snow piling atop a roof, silent, constant, undeniable. The Underground Railroad, as people once knew it, is no longer needed in the same way. It hasn't disappeared, it's simply evolved. Now it's letters instead of lanterns, classrooms instead of cabins, meetings instead of midnight rides. What once moved people in silence now moves their stories. Loud, clear, and proud. You sit in a small wooden schoolhouse one afternoon, sunlight slanting through dusty windows, and watch Liberty, Clara's daughter, teach her students about the alphabet. She's poised, sure, her voice calm but never dull. She says the letter, F, is for freedom, and the children nod like it's the most natural truth in the world. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and breathe in the scent of chalk and pine. Back in the village, people call you Papa now. Not boy, not and not you. Just Papa. It sounds soft, like worn flannel or warm bread. You never asked for it. That's why it matters. At the market, a white man named Mr. Allen sells you apples and calls you Sir. A decade ago, he wouldn't have let you drink from his well. Now he saves you the best fruit. You don't forgive him. Not really. But you nod. That's enough. Not all changes come so peacefully. The newspapers in town speak of new troubles, sharecropping schemes, prison labor, broken promises. Even with slavery outlawed, injustice finds its shape in other systems. You learn of black codes, and Jim Crow, and lynchings in places that once celebrated freedom's arrival. It's as if the shadow of slavery has grown teeth and learned to walk upright. You and your friends write letters. You hold meetings. You organize boycotts. And slowly, steadily, more people listen. Your voice, once silenced with chains, now carries through crowded halls and pulpit echoes. In 1871, you're asked to speak at a gathering in Toronto. They call it a commemoration of emancipation. You wear your best coat, the dark brown one with a patch on the left elbow, and Clara walks you to the church steps. She smiles, eyes lined with age, hands still firm. "Tell it true," she whispers. And you do. You tell them about the whispers in the woods, the false bottom wagons, the bloodied shoes. You speak the names of those who didn't make it, of Josiah, and Eliza's baby, and your mother. The audience is quiet. Then tears. Then applause that feels too loud for the solemnity of your memories, but you accept it anyway. It's not for pride. It's for proof. You were here. You endured. That night, a boy no older than 15 approaches you outside the church. "Sir," he says, "do you think we'll ever really be free?" You look at him closely. He's wiry, nervous, hopeful. He doesn't flinch when you study him. That means something. "Freedom," you say slowly, "isn't just a place or a law. It's what you carry with you, even when the world tries to bury it. And yes, I believe we'll get there. But not all at once. It's passed hand to hand." He nods, solemn, then walks away. You sleep deeply that night. No dreams. Just warmth. In the years that follow, your days become simpler. You tend a garden behind your home, grow beans and cabbage, trade with neighbors. You mend your own clothes now, a skill you learned from watching Clara in those early days. Her hands, long gone to rest, still guide your stitches. Liberty marries a printer from Montreal. They named their first son Josiah. You meet him when he's no older than a turnip, all gums and noise and fists. He cries every time someone puts him down. You like that about him. He grows quickly. Smarter than you ever were. One day, he asks, "Did you ever meet Harriet Tubman?" You nod. "Was she really like the stories?" You pause. She was more. The boy stares at you like he's trying to memorize your face. You don't stop him. As the 1880s pass, more people begin to write about the Underground Railroad. Scholars, journalists, even former conductors put their stories on paper. You're invited to speak in Ottawa, then Boston. Always to crowds hungry for the thrill of survival, the danger of flight. You give them what they want, but always end with the quiet part, the ache, the fear, the grief. "It wasn't just a story," you say. "It was a life." In Boston, someone paints your portrait. You sit stiffly, wondering how paint can ever hold a person. When it's done, you're surprised. Not because it's perfect, but because the eyes look like yours on the night you crossed into Canada. Not scared. Just awake. You keep the portrait on your wall, next to Liberty's wedding photo. Visitors often ask if it's really you. You shrug. Maybe it is. Maybe it's everyone who ever ran. Sometimes you take out the tin bell. You keep it wrapped in cloth inside an old tobacco tin. It hasn't rung in years, but the metal is still cold to the touch. You run your fingers along its rim, remembering the boatman, the fog, the moment your feet touched soil that would never sell you. The stories don't stop. They just change shape. One winter you fall ill. Nothing dramatic, just age catching up. The doctor, a woman with silver wire spectacles and hands like bird bones, visits every morning. She listens to your lungs, frowns at your cough, and brings tea brewed from roots and leaves. You ask her, one morning, "Do you know about the underground?" She smiles. "I know my grandmother came up from Tennessee. I know she said there were stars that told her which way to walk. I know she always baked 2 loaves, one for us, one for whoever might need it." You nod. That's enough. On your last healthy day, you walk to the church. The same one where you first warmed your hands by a borrowed fire. There's a new roof now, new benches, even a small bell tower. They ask if you'll speak once more. You agree. This time, your voice shakes. But no one minds. You tell them about silence and signals, about fear and bread and bells, about how you weren't brave, just desperate, how every step you took was paved by those who came before, and how even now you're still walking. When it ends, there's no applause, just a long hush, and a few sniffles, and then someone begins to hum. Swing low, sweet chariot. You hum too. Back home, you sit on your porch as the sun dips low. Josiah, now a boy of 10, sits beside you. Will you teach me the Psalms? He asks. All of them, you say. And the stories too. He nods, solemn as ever. Then he rests his head against your shoulder. You feel the weight of generations press against your ribs, and you don't shrink from it. You welcome it. The wind picks up. The trees murmur. The air smells like wood smoke and soil. And somewhere deep in the folds of your coat, the old bell shifts slightly, touching metal to metal, giving off the softest chime. Almost too soft to hear. But you hear it. You always do. You wake in the dark, not with fear, but with memory. The years have softened the edges of your past, but not dulled them. Your breath is slower now, your hands more hesitant, your steps measured. Yet your mind moves as clearly as the North Star once did, sharp, constant, guiding. Outside your window, snow has started to fall. Not the wild, howling storms of your early years in Canada, but a quiet, drifting kind. You've always liked snow. It hides things, erases tracks, offers stillness. You remember the first snowfall you ever saw after escaping, how it startled you, how you thought the sky was shedding its skin. You reach for your coat, the same one you've worn since Liberty's wedding, and step onto the porch. The night air stings your lungs, but it wakes you, makes you feel alive. The village sleeps. You listen for the bell in the church tower, the same bell you helped install when the town pulled its pennies. It doesn't ring tonight, but you imagine it does. In the morning, a letter arrives from Washington, D.C. Your granddaughter, Josiah's younger sister, is a schoolteacher now. She writes of her classroom, where she teaches children whose parents were born free and whose grandparents once crawled through swamps. She signs her name with a flourish. Yours in memory and promise, Amelia. You sit quietly after reading it. The ink is still wet. The words are fresh. But what they carry is old as the first breath of a runaway crossing the Ohio River. Hope. You decide to write back. You don't write often anymore. Your fingers ache from the cold and the years. But this time you do. You tell Amelia about the bell. You tell her about the man who gave it to you. You write. We didn't know then how big the story was. We only knew our part. But every one of us was a note in the song. Some screamed. Some whispered. Some walked until their feet split open. Some waited. Some ran again and again and again. And now you teach the children of those singers. You are their echo and their answer. Later that day, the town's historian stops by. A younger man, Ernest, always scribbling. He's compiling a book of origins, he says, collecting names, places, old stories before they vanish. Will you let me write about you? He asks. You laugh. You mean, will I tell you what I can't forget? He nods. You agree. But only on your porch. Only when the air smells like earth and the sun hits your knees. You tell him about the tree with the bent branch near the safe house in Pennsylvania. How it pointed like a crooked finger. You tell him about the coated quilt hung from a cabin window in Kentucky. Triangles for mountains, swirls for rivers. You tell him about the song your mother hummed while baking. Follow the drinking gourd. How you didn't know until years later what it meant. You do not cry while telling him. Not until the end. I never thought I'd live long enough, you say, to be listened to. He writes that down too. That night, Liberty visits. She's gray-haired now, her husband gone 3 years. She brings you a bowl of stew and a letter from a museum in Philadelphia. They want to interview you. Film you even. To preserve the legacy. They say. You decline? Not because you're ungrateful, but because you know your legacy isn't a video. It's the boy who knocks on your door at dusk. The choir that sings freedom songs every first Sunday. The rows of gravestones with unfamiliar names, but known stories. Besides, you tell liberty. If people really want to know, they'll listen. You both sit in silence for a while. The fire crackles. The stew warms your palms. The weight of everything you've seen, carried, lost, and reclaimed settles over the room. But it doesn't feel heavy. It feels rightful. Some days later, the boy returns. Josiah's son. He's taller now, voice lower. I read about Henry Box Brown, he says. He really nailed himself into a box? Crate, you correct him gently. And yes, 27 hours. No food. No air. Just belief. Why would someone do that? You pause. Then answer. Because sometimes the only way out is through the dark. The boy nods slowly. I think I want to be a writer. You smile. Then remember this. Truth is heavy, but it floats. Tell it honest, and it'll rise. You hand him your copy of Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Dog-eared, spine split, margin notes everywhere. He takes it like it's a holy thing. Spring comes. Birdsong returns to the fields. The town holds a small ceremony, 50 years since emancipation. They ask you to speak, but you say no. Instead, you sit in the back pew of the church and watch a young girl, barely 8, read aloud from a book of black poetry. Her voice doesn't quiver. Her knees don't shake. When she finishes, she beams. You clap the loudest. Outside, a new plaque has been installed at the edge of town. It reads, To those who walked when there was no path. Your name is on it. So is Clara's. So is the boatman's, though no one ever learned his real name. They just wrote. The bell ringer. You touch the plaque. You close your eyes. You hear water. Fog. A single bell chime. Time folds. You are running. You are hiding. You are laughing with Clara in the Canadian snow. You are sitting at a press printing the word. Freedom. You are holding liberty for the first time. You are humming. You are resting. And still, the underground moves. Not through tunnels anymore, but through mouths, pages, chords. In songs passed down, in bells still hidden in old coats, in stories whispered under quilts. Somewhere, a child sings, Go down, Moses, without knowing where they learned it. Somewhere, a woman in Alabama hangs a blue star quilt on her line and wonders why she always cries afterward. Somewhere, a man writes his family tree and finds a blank branch marked, Vanished 1852. And somewhere, your bell rings again. Not in sound, but in memory. The underground was never just about escape. It was about dignity reclaimed. About choosing to live free, even before the law agreed. And so, as the final years draw near, you do not feel sorrow. You feel completion. Not peace, because the work goes on. But something like it. And when the last night comes, it is gentle. No thunder. No panic. Just a hush. You lie beneath a quilt Liberty made, with patterns stitched from symbols only some still understand. The fire burns low. The stars return. And just before your breath stills, you hear it ring, and you smile. Because the road goes on. Because someone new is walking it now. Because you were part of the path.